Chapter 9. Problems, real or imagined, brought out a stubborn streak in Sebastian. After the shock of Khan's revelations about hidden cameras, photos in magazines and on the internet, and Guapo's near capture, instead of retreating to the relative safety of more conventional behavior so as not to attract attention, he went further out on a limb and cycled to school wearing nothing but his skimpy running shorts. The fresh air rushing over his loins was so invigorating he decided to take Reggie for a long naked ride in the country to share the sensual thrill. A nervous premonition after his sleepless night had Reginald cycling the long route to school. Past Sebastian's house. The place was empty, so he sped up in the hope of overtaking him, which he did about a kilometer from school on a quiet, tree-lined street. Two scrawny louts of about Sebastian's age in boots and fake army camouflage had shoved Sebastian off his bicycle and were taunting him with what looked like small baseball bats, feinting, prodding, tapping his head and shoulder, landing the occasional more solid blow on ribs while dancing around teasing him as they would a dog. Sebastian looked unworried, but his attempts to get close enough to attack were stymied. If he approached one, the other would batter him from behind, landing a light blow to his head, cheek, or neck. Painful but not lethal. Equals fucking queer shit, riding round with ya balls hanging out? What are ya? Looking for trade? Wanna be fucked up the arse? Showing your privates to the whole world? Bloody sick pansy, you're a fucking disgrace. So engrossed were they in their fun they didn't see Reginald approach. Stop this ignorant violence and return to your institution, Reginald said calmly, leaning his bike against a tree. Another fucking queer smart arse. Looking for a hiding. Something like that, Reginald said softly, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Here's your Ponzi grammar school bum chum, the other jeered to Sebastian. Also looking for trouble. He raised his bat in readiness to strike at Reginald, expecting him to back off. Instead, with a remarkable turn of speed, Reginald's bony fist smashed into the side of his head. He dropped like a stone. Reginald turned to face the other attacker, not so bravely looking around for an exit strategy. Typical fucking queer, can't fight clean, had to take him by surprise. Whereas it's a proud heterosexual tradition for two guys to beat up one unarmed man. Sure is, especially if he's a queer. With that he lunged. Reginald easily sidestepped, slammed the side of his hand down on his attacker's arm, and smiled peacefully at the scream of pain. You fucking broken my arm. You bastard, I'll get you for that. It would be better if you apologize to this guy for attacking him, Reginald said, watching Sebastian pick up one of the dropped bats. Like fuck. You guys are dead meat. Sebastian's bat slammed into the oaf's back, causing him to fall onto his face on the grassy verge where he lay groaning and twitching. Now you've two people to get, Sebastian said softly, landing a solid kick on what were almost certainly broken ribs. Fucking faggots, hissed the first guy Reginald had floored. He was on his hands and knees, attempting to stand. Do you apologize for attacking a defenseless man? Reginald asked sweetly. I'll fucking kill you both first. Filthy brown-nosed crap eaters. Sebastian walked forward and stomped on the thug's hands. His feet were bare, but the soles were as hard as seasoned leather, and Reginald heard the snap of several bones milliseconds before shrieks of agony tore along the quiet street. Attaboy, Seb, Reginald said cheerfully as he picked up his bike. The first rule of defense. If you're forced into a corner and have to fight, make sure they never want to attack you again. The only people these sorts respect are those who can dish out more punishment than them. Sebastian was already astride his bike. Thanks, Reggie, I'd have been late for school if you hadn't given me a hand. No worries. I hope you'll forgive me for butting in, but I've been looking for an excuse to practice my moves in a real situation and couldn't resist. Equals nothing to forgive, Reggie. What's mine is yours. Equals even the family jewels, Reginald asked, indicating the fine set of genitalia dangling out of Sebastian's shorts. Equals all yours. Equals excellent. But why are you revealing them to passers-by? Are they in need of airing? Equals something like that, Sebastian answered with a laugh. Equals turns out not to have been such a great idea. Apparently seeing balls is confronting to heterosexuals. Equals it's not only homophobic yobs who might feel intimidated by a pair of testicles and a not insignificant penis flapping in the breeze as you cycle through this genteel suburb. What must all those schoolgirls waiting for the bus back there have thought? Equals can't imagine, and I don't give a tinker's cuss what they or anyone else thinks. The whole world can go fuck itself. I'll leave them alone if they grant me the same respect. But don't fret, I've a pair of Speedos in my knapsack to put on at school so you can sit beside me in my THS and not be embarrassed. Equals nothing you do could ever embarrass me. Equals great, then I won't bother with them. Sebastian blew a kiss as they cycled through the gates. And Reginald's heart pounded with love for the brittle, sensitive young man whose brave exterior hid a deep and complex melancholy. Instead of improving, Sebastian's day got worse. Reginald had gone to check on an experiment in the science labs before assembly, and Sebastian was crossing the quadrangle when several not-so-bright scions of wealthy parents wolf whistled and yelled, "Equals you touting for business, Sebastian." Sebastian turned, frowning. "Equals what's that?" "Equals are you peddling your arse, Sebastian?" The quadrangle was crowded with students waiting for the assembly bell, and a sudden silence descended. Sebastian looked around at faces grinning in expectation of a fight. "Equals what do you call a male prostitute?" someone yelled. "Equals hee-haw," came the response. Blood drained from Sebastian's face, a sudden chill enveloped him and he felt sick. Had someone seen the videos of him on the internet? Fuck. He scanned the faces for friends and found only predators ready to feed on the carcass of a victim. "Equals sexy shorts, Sebastian," yelled David Jacobs, the largest and ugliest senior student of all time in Mr. Noel's opinion. "Equals bit rude though, exposing your butt cheeks." Relieved that it was only his shorts that had caused the comments, Sebastian laughed. "Equals I'm glad they turn you on, David." "Equals fuck off. I'm not your wrestling mate. Save your poncy clothes for the queers in the park. Flashing your arse here will only get you a boot up the ring, not what you're looking for." "Equals don't be a fuckwit." Ernie Goldberg, who'd always seemed friendly, wandered towards them. Sebastian turned in the hope of support and was too late to react when David wrapped his arms round him from behind and lifted him off the ground for Ernie to whip off his shorts. Loud cheers and jeers as they waved them in the air, tempting Sebastian to try to get them. Sebastian's principal survival trick at school had been to never appear ridiculous. He wasn't concerned about standing naked in the crowded quadrangle. Dozens of the kids present had been naked with him in the swimming pool the previous lunchtime, and he knew he looked good. Racing round trying to snatch his shorts off two fully dressed guys would make him look utterly stupid, so he took a textbook from his knapsack and read it quietly, to the amusement of his audience and irritation of his attackers, who were now the ones looking foolish. A few minutes later the bell rang and he joined everyone in the assembly hall, a magnificent structure of fake marble columns and Roman arches supporting a vaulted ceiling. Since his first day at school, Sebastian had carried a clean handkerchief in his knapsack, just in case. It had only ever been used to clean his hands after his bike chain came off, or to bind scratches and wipe off blood, because he never caught colds and so far hadn't had to wipe away tears. Placing the handkerchief on the seat, he sat on it. All around him guys were turning their heads, whispering, giggling and laughing. Equals silence, roared the deputy principal. The teachers processed up the aisle to their seats on the stage, and it was business as usual until the end, when the senior school was instructed to remain behind. Equals come to the front of the hall, lads, Mr. Noel said quietly, waiting till they stood in a small half-circle in front of him. Equals until today I was proud that there was no bullying, no harassment and no gang violence in this school. However, before assembly I watched a lad being verbally harassed, then set upon in an attempt to humiliate him. Defend yourself, Jacobs. Equals sir, it was just a bit of fun. Equals I see. The principal turned to Reginald and said, equals you hold his arms, Reginald, while James takes his trousers down and runs off with them. Equals sir. No. Equals just a bit of fun, David, and then we'll do it to young Goldberg. Equals sir. Please. Equals so it is only fun when it's done to others. How many of you, he asked the 20 young men standing before him, equals would like to live in a world where most people were like Jacobs and Goldberg? Don't answer, I want you to think about it today and tonight. Do you want to live in a world where the bullies force you to be like them? Or do you want to be free to live, dress, act and be interested in whatever you choose, as long as it doesn't affect the right of others to do the same? He stared at Jacobs. What prompted this disgusting display? Equals sir. Some of us reckon Sebastian should wear more clothes. Equals why? Equals because it's rude. Equals Mr. Noel looked David Jacobs up and down and sighed. Equals David, you're out of shape, your long baggy shorts make your legs look skinny and weak and your belly flabby. You look totally sexless. And singularly unattractive, especially with those ridiculous black boots hanging off the end of hairy white legs. Do you really think Sebastian would look better if he dressed like you? What do the rest of you think? Who looks the best? Silence and embarrassed shuffling. Equals well, I would certainly prefer to look at a fit and healthy naked person than an overweight, flabby fellow in ridiculous baggy gear that he wears simply because it's fashionable. I also wonder about the state of mind of young men who take so much trouble to hide their legs and crotches. It bodes ill for the future of men. Where are Sebastian's shorts? Equals in my locker, sir. Equals well, we're late for first period, so as neither of you can afford to skip classes, both of you bring them to my office at interval, with a written apology to Sebastian. You may go. Equals but sir. What about him? Equals what about whom, Reginald? Equals Sebastian. He has nothing to wear. Equals does that worry you, Sebastian? Equals no, sir, but I'll have to explain to the teachers. Equals they will understand. I told them what had happened and the possible outcome before they entered assembly. Equals thank you, sir. And so it happened. Not a question was asked, and the giggles and stares and occasional secret smiles of complicity from other students in the corridor between classes were tinged with respect. One young junior sidled up to him, lightly touched his buttocks and whispered, equals I think you're the greatest, before racing away. Sebastian was quietly pleased, but had learned a valuable lesson. Popularity is not an occupation. It is an ephemeral and very temporary thing. Admirers easily become antagonists if led by a equals strong critic. It had come as a nasty shock to realize that virtually every boy in the quadrangle that morning had been prepared to join in the harassment, to take pleasure in the hope of his humiliation and see him made a fool of by two louts. His already wafer-thin respect for the opinion of others had in that moment dissolved. Never again would he assume he had the support of anyone except Reggie, who never left his side for the rest of that morning, furious with himself for not having been in the quadrangle before assembly to protect his lover. Sebastian, on the other hand, was remarkably pleased with his morning, especially Mr. Noel's reaction. At the beginning of third period Mr. Achilles breezed into the senior maths class, unable to hide a smile that seemed to have been stuck there since the previous evening. Equals why the big grin, sir, someone asked. Equals looks as if you've hit the jackpot. Equals I certainly have, Gerald, Con Achilles replied, winking at Sebastian as he turned to the whiteboard. Equals are you going to share your winnings? Equals winnings are not always of the pecuniary sort, Desmond. Equals you've set a wedding date? Can I come? Equals the opposite, young man. I have cancelled my wedding. Equals good on you, sir. As Oscar Wilde didn't say, the decision to marry is usually taken in haste and repented at leisure. Equals yet. My parents should never have married, someone said softly. Equals mine neither. Mum's nagging dad into an early grave. My father expects me to hate my mother like he does. I wish they'd both drop dead. Mr. Achilles held up his hand for silence. Equals it's never a good idea to broadcast family details you might regret sharing later. He sat on the edge of his desk. Equals but the topic is important because you are fast approaching marriageable age. All of you would be considered a equals good catch by any woman, because you come from wealthy families. Therefore you need to be aware of the pitfalls. Equals if you watch popular movies it won't surprise you to learn that the human female is an extraordinarily cunning sexual predator with a proven success rate in getting the man of her choice to father a child, and then support her until he drops. That's one of the reasons there are 5 or 6,000 million more humans than the biosphere can sustain. Equals right on, sir, Reginald said with feeling. Equals since the beginning of this lesson the planet's population has increased by more than 2,000, one species has become extinct, 400 hectares of forest have been cut, 200 hectares have become desert, and $41 million have been spent on warfare. Everyone cheered. Equals thanks, Reginald, for that dollop of doom and gloom. Where was I? Ah yes. The female mating instinct was probably the main reason humans didn't become extinct when half of all infants died before their first birthday, but they have to share the blame for population stress with modern medicine. Equals both males and females have a powerful, primeval urge to breed, but the female instinct can be alarmingly irrational. Considerations such as, is there enough money to support the child? What will happen if the mother gets sick? Will she make a good mother? Would a child born to her be happy when it grows older? Are seldom considered. Equals in this morning's paper there's a piece about a 75-year-old Italian woman who's just given birth to twins after an assisted pregnancy. Yuck. Equals thanks for that tidbit, Arthur. Reginald looked at Sebastian, who nodded thoughtfully, thinking of his own mother. She was one of the reasons that all his life he'd wished he hadn't been born, and perhaps accounted for his none too secret contempt for other humans. Equals man, Mr. Achilles continued, equals usually only want to breed if the domestic situation is stable and financially secure enough to give the child the essentials for a good life. If the decision to have children were entirely left to men, there would be no overpopulation. Arguments over whether to have children add to all the other strains on marriages. Equals you make marriage sound like a punishment. Equals does anyone know of a truly happily married couple? Silence. Then. Equals my sister divorced after 15 months. Equals my cousin's being sued for maintenance by a slut he reckons he never even screwed. Equals my uncle gave his Mercedes away for $1 so his wife wouldn't get it when they divorced. Equals our next door neighbor went mad and shot himself because he loved his kids but his wife was given them and the house when they split, so he had to live in a dump to pay the maintenance. Equals I'm never getting married. It's cheaper to pay for sex when you need it, and there's no strings. Another silence, then. Equals it looks as if you've done the wise thing, sir. Got out in time. Equals indeed I did, Gerald. Indeed I did. At interval, before going to see his father, Sebastian called into the principal's study to pick up his shorts and the apologies, and then shake the unwilling hands of his attackers, who then left the room. Keep away from the main entrance and avoid school visitors, warned the principal, as Sebastian stuffed his shorts in his knapsack. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you. I know. Outside, Jacobs and Goldberg were waiting. Aren't you going to put the bloody things on? No. All that fuss and you fucking choose to stay bare-arsed. I didn't make a fuss, Mr. Noel did, because you were trying to force me to conform to your ideas on how to dress by using violence and making me look ridiculous. Aren't you embarrassed? Why? Walking around starkers. No. Why should I be? Fuck sans pair, you're a true weirdo. Perhaps, but don't try anything else or you'll regret it. You threatening me? Yes. The look in Sebastian's eyes was cold, and both Jacobs and Goldberg felt a flicker of fear. They held out their hands. Peace. They shook hands again, this time warily. Actually, you don't look naked, you're more like a wild animal. I mean that as a compliment. Accepted. I can't imagine anyone else looking more relaxed naked than dressed. Somehow, I don't know, it's strange, but why do you shave your pubes? For the same reason you shave your chin. See you, and he was off. On arrival at the library, he was surprised to see Reginald deep in conversation with Rex Troverd. In his office, Rex looked up and waved him in. Reginald's worried about you, Sebastian. He thinks you might be in danger at home, is it true? Probably. Now Guapo's done a bunk and I've discovered they've been secretly photographing me and posting stuff on the internet. A shocked silence. Sebastian. Why haven't you told me this? Reginald was almost angry. Didn't want to worry you, Reggie, but I've told you now. That does it? I'm sleeping at your place from now on, you need a bodyguard. Suits me, Sebastian grinned. I want both of you to come to dinner tomorrow and you can fill us in on everything. Us, Reginald asked. My partner Fee, and me. She's much smarter than I am and far more useful in an emergency. Can you come? Reginald looked at Sebastian, who nodded. Looking forward to it, sir. Call me Rex, if you don't mind, Reginald. It's bad enough suddenly learning I have a 17-year-old son without being addressed by his boyfriend as if I'm a stranger. Reginald blushed charmingly. You don't mind. Mind. About Seb and me being. Far from it. I'm relieved my son has such excellent taste. So, tomorrow straight after school. You'll both cycle here. He wrote the address on a scrap of paper and handed it to Sebastian. I'll get home as soon as I can, but Fee will be expecting you. Sure thing, Rex, and I'll make sure Sebastian wears clothes. Not for us, we're easy about that. No, for the fuckwits who lie in wait to bash up handsome young men riding past on their bikes. Has that happened to you? He demanded of Sebastian. This morning, but they're wishing they hadn't, Sebastian grinned. Reggie taught them a lesson. They won't forget for a while if they ever do. You've got me worried. No need, we're a good team. I don't doubt it. Meanwhile, son and heir, remember to put your shorts on before leaving school. Sebastian grinned and slipped them on. Better. No, but safer. See ya, Dad. The bell rang for lunch. How about you and me taking the afternoon off, Reggie? Why? Our mothers will be joining 100 other lost souls welcoming Gentile Jesus into their bosoms with loud singing and clapping, so my place is free and I thought we might do a reconnoitre to see where cameras are hidden, and anything else that springs to mind. Equals you're on. No evidence of their morning's battle remained as they rode swiftly past, and as predicted the Sanspier residence was devoid of life. After downing their cut lunches with a cup of tea they held a whispered conference on the far side of the pool, facing away from the house. Equals we don't know if the cameras are on, so I reckon we should find the control post and see if anything's being recorded, then if it's safe, go looking for them. I imagine they're only in my bedroom and out here, so it's safe to look around the rest of the place. Equals okay, lead on Mac stuff. Leaving no cupboard unopened, no drawer not investigated, no wall untapped and no picture or mirror unturned, they agreed that the guest bathroom, garage, kitchen, pantry, lounge, Sebastian's bathroom, and dressing room were all innocent of guile. That left only Desoless Suite. Sebastian hadn't been in there since he was 10. After he reached puberty his mother said it wasn't right for a son to visit his mother in her private room, and he had never questioned this, mainly because the less time he spent with her the better, and he had not the slightest desire to enter her lair and risk seeing her without clothes and several layers of makeup. At first glance it was the mirror image of Sebastian's own suite, until Reginald realized the dressing room and bathroom were narrower. No secret entrance presented itself, however, despite assiduous probing, so they entered the bedroom, a stale, overdressed but somber place with curtains drawn and a heavy odor of age inadequately camouflaged with perfume. Equals aha, Reginald sighed, gazing at a large mirror to the right of the door. I wonder what's behind this. Running his fingers round the edge of the gilt frame he triggered a catch and the mirror swung outwards to reveal a narrow room about 2 meters wide that ran the full length of both bathroom and dressing room. A light sensor startled them as they entered, bathing the space in soft light that illuminated a long bench on which were several pieces of electronic equipment including a computer tower, monitor and keyboard. On the wall at eye level, 7 flat screens gazed blankly. As there was no activity, the cameras obviously weren't on and they probably hadn't been seen or heard. Neatly shelved under the monitors were dozens of DVDs, labeled with date and name. Sebastian picked up one from the left and another from the right. Equals Sebastian, he read. Equals it seems this was made when I was 12. I wonder what's on it? Probably me wanking or dancing. Who on earth would want to watch a kid playing with himself? Equals lots of poor perverts, apparently. Equals do you want to watch it, Reggie? Equals would it embarrass you? Equals of course not. Why would it be more embarrassing than a video of me swimming or playing in the park? This other one is more interesting, it's labeled equals Sebastian and Reginald, and dated last Thursday when you stayed. So, you're already on candid camera. Would it embarrass you if we watched it? Reginald shrugged and blushed. Equals probably. I'm not as easy as you. Equals don't worry. You said we shouldn't disturb things so we won't. Equals good. Anyway, I can see the reality tonight. He checked out the rest of the bench. Equals the modem and router are standard with wireless connections to both this computer and yours in your bedroom. What sort of internet connection? Equals just a satellite dish, it'll be years before we get fiber optics. Equals there's a good printer and fax and that's about all. Okay, let's go find the cameras that feed the images. Equals hang on. Look at these. Sebastian was rifling through a filing cabinet. Equals there's a file on each of the guys who've stayed here. A sort of ledger. Names and dates on one side and amounts of money on the other. Fuck. She got $10,000 up front for keeping Albert here for a week last year, and another $2,000 for every video of us. According to this there were 10 of them. He was rather sexy. All the guys were, now I come to think about it. You'd imagine that at least one of the homeless boys saved by Fartbook would have been plain, if not downright ugly. Wouldn't you? Equals MMM, very odd. But we mustn't waste time, let's go. Checking that everything was the same as when they entered, they left Desol's suite in search of the 7 cameras that fed the 7 monitors. Sebastian showed Reginald the one looking like a lawn sprinkler, and Reginald discovered another on the far side of the pool, pointing at the spot where Sebastian and his guests usually sunbathed. Once they knew what they were looking for, the 5 in the bedroom were embarrassingly easy to see. Glittering eyes on gargoyles on the carved supports of the 4-poster bed were tiny lenses. One on the left post at the head, another on the right at the foot of the bed, another in the center of the footboard, and one in the canopy directly above the center of the bed. The 7th was embedded in the ornate frame of a mirror screwed to the wall nearest the left side of the bed. Equals must be a bouncy picture when you're hard at it, Reginald muttered. Equals the posts aren't attached to the bed, they're bolted to the floor and the bed's on casters so it can be rolled out for cleaning, Sebastian explained as he demonstrated. Reginald got down on his hands and knees and inspected the floor. Equals see here? The concrete floor under the bed's been chipped away and resurfaced in a line from the post to the wall to embed the wires. It's a neat job. Only someone looking for it would notice. I guess the wires go inside the wall up to the attic and back to the control room. Equals knowing this, do you still want to sleep here tonight? Equals why not? Equals you won't be embarrassed. Equals too late for that. Your mother's probably already earned a couple of $1,000 with that video of us smooching and jerking off. He grinned at Sebastian, drew him into a hug and kissed him on the nose. Equals it's sort of exciting knowing someone's turned on by me. I'm beginning to understand you. Makes me feel proud, in a way. He stopped, embarrassed at revealing his thoughts. Sebastian laughed. Equals tonight we'll give them a show to remember so they'll not have a clue. We're on to them. Equals Sebastian. Are you home already? Came a high-pitched shout from the entrance. Equals fuck. That's Mom. Quick, get your clothes off or she'll be suspicious. They tossed their clothes onto the floor of the dressing room, rolled the bed back into position, and were lying on it reading a school textbook when Desol poked her head through the door leading to the lounge. Equals there you are, darling. Hello, Reginald. You've left your bikes in front of the door, be a dear and put them in the garage. I'm expecting a delivery and don't want to pay the insurance if the fellow trips and breaks a leg. Her laugh was more a rasp than a tinkle, but clearly she suspected nothing. Equals sure thing, Mom. Can Reggie stay the night? Equals of course, dear. He's always welcome. We had such a lovely afternoon, your mother and I. Reginald. I feel so refreshed. You must join us one day, both of you. You'd enjoy yourselves. Many nice young people go. Equals do I have to wear clothes? Equals yes, dear, but it wouldn't hurt you. Equals okay, I'll think about it. He turned to Reginald. Equals we'd better go and get your mother's permission. Equals just telephone, Sebastian. You never use your mobile phone, it's always off when I call you. Like this afternoon. Desol sounded petulant. Equals we have to switch them off during class and I forget to turn the thing on afterwards. I'll try to remember. Equals good boy. I worry if I can't contact you. Equals Reggie has some school books we'll need for tomorrow, and we have to collect his homework. Equals and a change of underwear, Reginald added. Equals oh, do you wear underpants? Desol said in a tone suggesting that wearing them was slightly perverted. Equals off you go then, and I'll make you both a delicious meal. Equals lucky we heard her, Sebastian laughed as they cycled away. Equals ha. Did you hear that? She worries about me. Worries I might do a bunk like Guapo and she'd have no more sexy videos. She means. Reginald just smiled, thinking about the night to come. Desol was telephoning her boss. Equals Mr. Fartbook. Sebastian has been sniffing around in my room. I don't know if he found anything, but, yes, the school holidays start this Friday, 3 weeks, next Monday. Fine, I'll make sure he's here. Chapter 10. After school, Khan drove to the backpacker hostel where Guapo had been staying and explained that the young photographer had suffered a fatal accident. He was his nearest relative and had come to collect his things and pay any outstanding charges. The half-dressed young woman on duty unplugged earphones, asked him to repeat himself, shrugged her indifference and, as Khan was able to describe in detail the pack and its contents, handed everything over in exchange for the money owed, not bothering to ask for identification or a receipt for the goods claimed. Back at his place, Khan began instructing his lover in the sort of self-defense that used any means available to do the maximum damage possible to one's assailant in the shortest time with the least chance of being seen. The finest and lightest of Khan's collection of flick knives, a folding truncheon that looked like a fat souvenir ballpoint pen, a set of ultralight, non-metallic knuckle dusters, 4 sachets of capsicum dust, and a pair of innocent-looking boat shoes with concealed blades in their toe caps that drew blood with a light kick, were some of the gifts he bestowed on the love of his life, along with several useful tips learned while paying for his university studies by working for his debt collector uncle in Sydney. Reginald's mother was as obese as Sebastian's was scrawny, and of an equally opposite temperament. Although neither woman would admit the truth, it was only their God's promise of brownie points in the hereafter if they were pleasant to someone they detested, that kept them from scratching each other's eyes out whenever they met. Mrs. Blackthorne welcomed Sebastian with a garlic-scented hug and insisted they wash down a large slice of homemade fruitcake with a glass of fresh milk. It was the first time Sebastian had been inside Reginald's place and the first homemade cake he had eaten. It seemed so cozy and homely he felt like crying, but had no idea why. I was just saying to your mother, Sebastian, that it would be so lovely if you and Reggie came to church one day and let God into your hearts. Sebastian felt like crying again, but for a different reason. Unable to stop himself, he smiled brightly and asked, and which God would that be, Mrs. Blackthorne? She shook her head in confusion. What do you mean, dear? Well, humans have worshipped about 20,000 different gods over the last 100,000 years, so I ought to find out which one you worship before I put my foot in it. Why, the one true God, she said sweetly. All the previous gods were merely parts of the one true God. Jesus came and taught us that we holy followers of the invisible Superman in the sky, worship the God who encompasses all the others in one supreme being. Sebastian's smile was beatific. Gosh. And you think he'd take an interest in me? She patted his head. Of course he does, Sebastian. She turned to her son. Reggie darling, be a dear and take the dishes to the kitchen. Reginald sighed and did as he was told. I'm so pleased you are Reginald's friend, Mrs. Blackthorne said as soon as her son was out of earshot. You're so manly, but are you sure you're not cold? No, why? Dragging her finger lightly over his firm young chest, she giggled, you've no shirt and only those teensy-weensy shorts. I can, she simpered coquettishly. What? See your genitals. Mrs. Blackthorne's simper became an embarrassed twittering of delight. Oh, you youngsters so uncomplicated. You can only see the shape, just as I can see the shape of your breasts. She giggled again excitedly, dragged her eyes away from Sebastian's crotch and whispered conspiratorially, Sebastian, you're obviously a healthy, normal young man and I need your help. Reggie tells me he's gay. This is of course impossible, but I can't change his mind. Please can't you persuade him to stop this nonsense? Why? Equals it is dangerous for his eternal soul. Equals dangerous? How? Equals God has decreed that those who fail the tests he sets can never enter the kingdom of heaven. Equals what tests? Equals everyone is born with a cross to bear something they must overcome, to prove they deserve to enter the kingdom of heaven. Some people have a tendency to stealing, to violence, to equals obesity, Sebastian cut in ruthlessly. Equals if you are a real friend of Reggie, Mrs. Blackthorne continued as if he hadn't spoken, equals then. Please persuade him to change his ways. Equals you don't like him the way he is. Equals yes. Of course I love him, it's only that. Equals you love your invisible Superman more. Equals yes. No. Equals homosexuality isn't a choice, you know, it's fixed, like eye color and all the other things that make us individuals. Equals so they say. But that doesn't mean he has to do it. Equals and if your God decreed that blue eyes were bad, you'd close your eyes and refuse to see. Equals it's not the same thing. Equals you're right, it isn't. What you are demanding of Reggie is much, much worse. The need to love someone and share sexual pleasure with them is the most powerful human instinct, and the source of a sense of self-worth, happiness and contentment. You want to deprive your son of the joys of loving, sharing and caring for another person. This is the cruelest thing anyone can do to a fellow human. Not only will I have no part in it, but I will do all I can to persuade Reggie that to follow your demands is the path to misery and probable suicide. Sebastian turned abruptly and left the house, followed closely by Reginald. They cycled to a park and sprawled over the grass, watching clouds scudding across a yellowing sky. Equals it's going to rain, possibly a cyclone, Sebastian remarked. Equals probably Reginald was distracted. Equals Sebastian, I listened to what you were saying to Mum just before we left. Thanks. But how on earth did you come up with the that stuff? Equals internet chat. She thinks I'm equals normal and can talk you into heterosexuality. Equals I know, she's always on about it. Equals does her nagging affect you? Equals I try not to let it but, Reginald shrugged hopelessly. Equals I thought my mother was bad enough, selling my body and sexuality with videos and photos, but that's nothing compared to yours. I know most people would say what's happened to me is child abuse, but I think it's a hoot, an ego booster as long as the guys are lookers and the wrong people don't see it. But what your mother is doing is psychological abuse of the worst kind. If I'd stayed any longer I'd have been really rude. Equals you were perfect. Thanks. I know I'm not evil and sinful, and I know her God stuff is a load of crap, but it does get me down occasionally. Equals well, not anymore. You and I are never going to be victims of supernatural crap. Together. We'll put the world to rights. Equals all of it. Equals well, our bit at least. Desol was irritated at their lateness but managed to conceal it beneath somewhat scatty chatter and a feigned interest in the boys' doings. Determined to seem totally open and innocent, they told her about their day, making it all sound like fun, even the fracas on the street before school. She appeared amused at the idea of her son spending the morning naked, her sole concern being that he hadn't picked up a bug from the seats and had showered properly. While they secretly congratulated themselves on a sterling performance, Desol was pleased to have her suspicions confirmed. Sebastian was never normally so open and easy. This sudden candor had to be a facade to cover his snooping around. Well, she'd seen through his little ploy and was now even more delighted at the prospect of his departure. And after a sufficient interval the gangly Reginald could follow suit. After watching the news, Sebastian and Reginald turned on the outside floodlight and went for a swim, horsing around in front of the cameras, then lying on the grass watching the stars, kissing and fondling as if they were being paid for it. After doing their homework they put on an even more Explicit show in which each explored every inch of the other, their bodies positioned for the best possible camera angle. Each managed 3 orgasms, one in a mouth, one in their lover's hand, and one sitting facing each other, erections tied together with red ribbon. That was brilliant, Seb, Reggie panted once the lights were out. What do you say we hire ourselves out as performers? You're kinky Reginald Blackthorne, you know that. MMM. And one day soon I want you to fuck me. Despite Reginald's apparent enthusiasm, it was obvious to Sebastian that he was not looking forward to the activity with unadulterated delight, so he answered with a vague, okay, if you want. Don't you want to, Reginald asked in ill-concealed relief. Not especially, probably because I don't want it done to me. But, I thought all gays did it. That you had to fuck up the arse otherwise you aren't really gay. If so, then I'm not really gay. I just like being with you, playing around and sleeping with you. Apart from that I'm not queer. Reginald snuggled into Sebastian's side. That's a relief. I didn't really want to, but thought I had to, you know, prove I really love you and would do anything for you. Reggie, what I want most in all the world is one friend I can trust to be himself. I don't want someone who is ready to go against his own principles and ideas because he thinks I might want it. If we're both true to ourselves, then nothing can go wrong because we'll always know what the other really wants. And all I want is you, exactly as you are. Like Polonius said to Laertes, to thine own self be true, it then must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man? Sort of, except we have to be false to just about everyone else because the world hates queers. Never forget that. Law changes have made no difference. More and more people are getting the religious disease like our mothers, believing the hatred spewed from pulpits. I can't believe you've thought all this stuff through so well. Like how you spoke to Mom. I feel so ignorant. I spend a fair amount of time alone here on the internet. It's full of useful information about us. Show me some time. I'm not allowed to go on the internet at home now, Mum's decided it's a tool of the devil. How does she cope with your father's job? Aren't performing artists and strippers sinners? Not if Dad can make money out of them. Mind you, Dad's hardly ever home anymore. At least. That means they don't argue all the time. I reckon becoming religious is a bit like furnishing a house, you go to the sales room and take the bits that suit you and leave the rest. On that piece of wisdom they fell asleep, waking far too late to do anything except grab breakfast, tell Desol they'd be going for a long bike ride after school and wouldn't be back till dark, then heading off to school, Reggie in his usual jeans and tank top, Sebastian in knee-length torn-off hipster jeans. Before assembly Sebastian sought out Khan. Sorry, Khan, I can't make it to wrestling after school, Reggie and I are visiting Papa and his Frau. Fee? She's lovely. How about lunchtime then? I need to talk. That'd be great, I hate missing a session. See you then. After a quick check to ensure he wasn't watched, Sebastian let himself into the room under the stairs. Khan was already there, stripped and ready. What'd you want to talk about? He asked as he removed his jeans. Guapo's gone back to Melbourne to prove to his family he's not dead. I told him to stay there until this mess is sorted. The fact that your mother pretended he had gone with Fartbook means he is in danger here. I want to help you guys get to the bottom of it, okay? Sure thing, Khan. We might need your muscle. It's yours. Also, I've learned a few tricks over the years that might be helpful. You're brilliant, Khan. I'll tell Rex tonight and let you know everything tomorrow. Meanwhile, I Guess you're missing guapo. Equals I'm a total mess. I'm in love, Seb. Can't imagine what on earth I was doing shagging that slut, when I could have been enjoying glorious sex with a handsome man. I guess I was just too busy being the alpha butch male to admit the truth about myself. Equals but you suspected. Equals of course. Why do you think I offered to continue wrestling instruction for just one kid? Equals Sebastian laughed aloud. Equals Coney is Achilles. You fancy me? Equals not in that way. I like you enormously. And you seemed, I don't know, sort of vulnerable. I have this urge to protect you. Sounds pathetic, but I'm not a chicken stealer. I never thought of sex although you're very sexy. Equals that's a relief, you're a bit old for me. Equals cheeky bastard, he laughed self-consciously. Equals I can't believe I'm talking to one of my students like this. Equals why not? Relationships and friendships are important, and if you're not wanting to make babies, surely sex is just a fun thing to do with someone? No different from playing a game of pool or wrestling together. It's not necessarily anything to do with love, although it's much more enjoyable doing it with someone you love. I love Reggie and we're great together, but that doesn't stop me playing tennis with someone else. Hell, I'm too young to become a boring old husband. I've read that. Equals stop talking like a textbook. Equals Reggie said a similar thing yesterday when I ripped shit out of his mother for telling him he'd never get to heaven if he was gay. I log on to a dozen forums and these things are discussed all the time. Equals even so, I must be going bonkers telling you all my secrets. Equals not at all. We're mates, aren't we? Khan was silent, not trusting himself to speak. Guapo had been the first man in his life he could call a real friend, someone he could be completely himself with, and now this strange but wonderful youth was offering his friendship. He swallowed away the lump in his throat and said softly, equals Sebastian, to be your friend would give me great pleasure. Equals so formal, Khan. Surely you knew I liked you. Equals yeah, but I assumed we were just wrestling mates. I didn't dare hope for friendship. Equals I've had only one real friend in my life, Sebastian said reflectively, equals and never expected to make another. And then, he stopped, wondering why tears were springing. Equals it's just that, I've realized that you're soft as well as tough and you care for me and I don't know why, but I care for you too. I trust you and, oh fuck. This is getting sentimental. Let's wrestle. Refreshed by the exercise, there was just time for a quick wash in the basin before the bell for afternoon school. The ride to Rex Trovert's house in the hills above Murubul tested their thighs as it was uphill most of the way. Equals be great coasting down on the way home, Reginald called over his shoulder, noticing that Sebastian seemed to be struggling. Equals come on kid, I thought you were fit. With a sudden spurt Sebastian passed him and arrived at the gate first. Equals what's the matter, old man? Too much for you. A short driveway under poinciana trees led to a blank wall and a heavy wooden door. They knocked and it opened to reveal a slight woman in a simple flowered shift. Her eyes were black. Hair a mass of loose black curls, arms and legs slim, and skin so dark if she stood in deep shade she'd be invisible. A set of perfect white teeth smiled and she welcomed them inside. Equals Rex said the one with the fewest clothes would be my stepson, so I guess you're Sebastian, and you're Reginald. Equals right first time. Equals I'm Fee. Fancy a cool drink after that ride. You're very fit, the pair of you. Equals thanks, a drink would be great. The small entrance hall opened to a large lounge room with windows on each side. On the right a view across trees to the city and sea several kilometers away. Opposite, French doors were open. Onto a private pool and trees. Not another house to be seen. The furniture was old, not antiques but good second-hand stuff built to last. Several leather armchairs, a rattan-back sofa sprinkled with colorful cushions. Several bluish Afghan carpets adorned the varnished wooden floor and white walls were almost covered in paintings, abstract and representational, European and indigenous. Equals come through to the patio, it's cooler. Equals you've a shade cloth over it, that's what we need. The water gets far too hot in summer. Can we swim? Equals of course. Equals need togs. Equals no. Here are your drinks. She handed each a long glass filled with fruit juice, which they downed, then stripped, and dived in. Equals cool at last. I thought I was going to melt by the time we got here. Come and join us, Fee. Equals I'm feeling shy. Equals of us? Two queers? I sure hope not. Hurry up or I'll come and get you. Fee shrugged off her shift, revealing a slim, boyish figure, and dived cleanly into the pool. Swimming 2 lengths underwater before surfacing. Equals you're like a fish. Equals Pisces is my sign. Equals mine too. Are you also left-handed? Equals ambidextrous. She turned to Reginald with a shy smile. Equals Reginald, you haven't said a word since you arrived. What are your interests? Once started on his passion, Reginald chatted happily about the local flora and fauna until Rex arrived and joined them in the pool. By the time they reluctantly climbed out, Sebastian had learned that his great-grandfather was a Canuck, kidnapped from the Pacific Islands and forced to work in the cane fields as an indentured laborer. Fee had been born in the bush 200 kilometers northwest of Camooweal. A scholarship to Brisbane Girls' Grammar led to university, where she majored in IT and learned to live among white people without becoming too depressed. She and Rex had met at university during an anti-racist rally and, unable to discover anything important on which they disagreed, they moved in together, refusing to marry because they were unwilling to be part of a social system from which, despite academic and other successes, they both felt alienated. Equals we stay together because we want to, not because we've signed a contract, Rex said softly. Equals and we don't want kids because there are quite enough already and the future doesn't look too hot. But you're already here, he said, responding to Sebastian's worried look. Equals so we've got the best possible arrangement. The joy of an intelligent son without the guilt of having bread. During dinner, Sebastian's solitary life was laid bare. Speaking distractedly as if he were talking about someone else, he told about his irritable mother, of whom he was so ashamed, never inviting anyone home, his rebellious nudity and sexually promiscuous behavior that had been encouraged by his mother, who made a healthy profit from exploiting it. When questioned, he swore he had no idea where the money came from to buy the house or to sustain their lifestyle, especially as Desol was only the part-time manager of a small employment agency. Rex and Fee remained sympathetically silent, letting Sebastian choose his own pace to speak. About Jack and the Equals guests, the private hospital where they recovered, and Sebastian's health was tested monthly, and to wonder why, despite becoming friends, none of the young men had contacted him after leaving. Finally they learned about Guapo's escape, Desoles pretense that he was with Mr. Fartbook, and the discovery of the porno magazines and internet videos fed by hidden cameras. Equals if I hadn't met Reginald at high school, and Mr. Noel hadn't been so understanding, I'd be dead by now. I was a weird suicidal mess with a mad mother and no friends. Several times I bashed my head against a wall till I lost consciousness. Once I drank kitchen cleaner and couldn't speak for weeks from throat burns. That's why my voice is sort of husky. Equals sexy, murmured Reginald. Sebastian grinned happily. Equals and then, by a pure fluke, I learned I have a father after all, and he is the nicest teacher in school. Equals I thought Con Achilles held that position. Equals he's a beaut guy and a good friend, but not father material. By the way, he knows all about me and the situation, and wants to help us. He's in love with Guapo, you see, and he can't come back till it's settled. Equals you mean, Khan's gay. Equals yeah. He dumped his fiancée when he met Guapo. Equals this is excellent news. He's one tough guy. Just the muscle we might need. Equals Reginald's a force to be reckoned with too, you know. Reginald blushed. Equals he saved me from a bashing the other day. Nearly killed the blokes, and is staying with me from now on. Reginald blushed and stuttered. Equals yeah, well, I didn't tell you, Seb, but after what you said to Mum, she reckons you're a bad influence and told me I was never to speak to you again. Equals so, what are you doing here? Equals when I said she could take a running jump, she gave me an ultimatum, either stop being gay or get out. So I got out. His three listeners gazed in astonishment and Reginald's bravado began to slip. He couldn't stop. A trembling lip so turned away to hide what he feared was his weakness. Sebastian grabbed hold of Reginald's shoulders and hugged him. Equals Reggie. That's terrible. You should have told me. Where are your things? Equals, I stormed out with only my school books. Equals no worries, you can have my clothes and we'd already decided you'd be staying with me. Equals you haven't got any clothes, Reginald said with a sad, wry smile. Equals then you can have some of mine because from now on this is also your home, Reginald, Rex said softly. You're as welcome here as Sebastian, so that's settled. He turned to Fee. Equals we now have two sons. Equals much better than one, she said with a huge grin. And there's a double bed for you both in the spare room. So no worries. Reginald swallowed and managed a smile. Equals right, said Fee brightly, equals now it's time to make a list of what we don't know, and ideas for action. Rex, pencil and paper. Reginald, check his spelling. Equals yes, ma'am. Equals we need answers to these questions. What happened to the young men? Why were the heavies who beat up and imprisoned Guapo in the van with Fartbook when they arrived at Sebastian's place? What were they planning for him? Where is this hospital? Who runs it? Who were the people at the farmhouse when Sebastian and Guapo arrived there after their weekend hike? Why was Guapo instructed to have sex with one? What other activities are they involved in? Equals hang on. I'm getting behind. Equals and you're a librarian, laughed Reginald, astonished at his daring. It was a novel experience for him to treat adults as equals. Equals does your mother have a mobile phone? Fee asked. Equals she bought one of the simplest models but still couldn't work out how to use it, forgot to keep it charged, and hated being available every minute of the day to whoever felt like phoning, although she phones me anytime she wants to, so I turn mine off. That really bugs her. Also, she likes to think about things before answering and reckons on the phone people demand instant decisions and responses. We've a landline that goes to the answering machine so she can listen to callers and decide whether to respond. Equals must be hard for her boss and staff. Equals everyone emails her. When she's home the internet's always on, and when an email arrives a little alarm sounds. It's efficient and it means she has a written record of everything. Equals sounds sensible, Fee nodded. Equals I also don't like being available all the time, so I switch the phone off unless I want to use it. What sort of internet connection? Equals satellite to router and Ethernet to computer, wireless to mine. Equals what are the 7 monitors connected to? Equals the computer. Equals so either she records directly onto the computer, then cuts DVDs to send on, or the ones you saw are copies for herself, and she sends the videos directly over the internet. Where does she work? Equals in an employment agency for young women, on James Cook Highway. It's called Go for Girls. Equals got that, Rex. He nodded. Equals what employment does Desol find for the young women, and where's Fartbook's hospital? Equals no idea about the girls, but the hospital's south about 10 kilometers, then turn into the hills. I'll draw you a map. Equals what's it called and why does he need a hospital? Equals as far as I know it doesn't have a name, we just call it Fartbook's hospital, and why he has it. I've no idea. Equals very suspicious. Equals but they do a good job on the guys. Equals after first damaging them, Reginald said bluntly. Equals indeed, Rex agreed. Equals what's your mother's email address? Equals ds@oursofher.net. She reckons she's part French and if you say ds like the French do, it means goddess. Equals for years the largest Citroën was called the DS for that reason, Rex volunteered, but no one was listening as Fee had jumped to her feet. Equals come with me, she led the way to her office where Reginald gasped. Equals Fee. All this electronic gear. What's your job? Equals I freelance for several banks, annoying hackers. Equals do you work for the cops too? Equals and have them come one night and beat me up because I'm black so must be a dumb crook? No. Thanks. Equals what are you going to do? Equals create a fake, no reply, untraceable email address, so I can send an attachment to Desol that, when opened, will instruct her computer to send a copy of everything she uploads or downloads to my computer. Equals a virus. Equals not really, it won't harm her computer. Equals can I watch? Equals of course her hands flew over the keys and she sat back. Equals what do you reckon? Equals Ever Young Cosmetics Limited Reginald read. Equals Dear Desol Sanspierre, we are delighted to inform you that you have been selected to take part in a 6-month free trial of the entire range of our beauty care cosmetics. Simply open the attachment and follow the link to claim $500 worth of exclusive creams and lotions. Sincerely, Esmd Anton, Senior Executive Officer, the Phoebe Foundation of Beauty. Equals not bad, Sebastian laughed. Equals she uses tons of makeup. Does the link work? Equals no, all she'll get is a message telling her the address can't be found. Fee smiled as she attached the link and pressed send. Equals let's hope she reads it soon. Equals when will we know? Equals when this computer starts beeping. That'll mean she's opened the link and there's incoming information. Equals how many computers have you? Equals 2 powerful ones for my work, a laptop for private. Equals sorry to interrupt, Rex broke in, equals but it's already dark and you don't want to arrive home suspiciously late. Stick your bikes in the back of the wagon and I'll drive you home. There's no moon and you've no lights on your bikes. Equals when can we come back? Equals the welcome mat's out 24/7. From today this house is yours. And the minute this is cleared up you're both coming to live with us. School holidays start on Friday and we'll work solidly on it then. Okay. Sebastian gave Rex an impulsive hug, and Fee a kiss on the cheek, then ran from the room before they could see his tears. It was all too good. Something was going to go wrong. Nothing good ever lasted. He was silent all the way home, leaving Reginald to talk quietly with Rex and agree to return on Saturday with Sebastian to stay for a few days, telling Desol they'd be going camping. Chapter 11. At school the following morning Sebastian told Con Achilles about their meeting with Rex and Fee, and invited him to the meeting the following Saturday morning. They decided to continue wrestling during the holidays at school because Con's place wasn't suitable. Con had already received 8 emails from Guapo and was impatient to get the problem solved so they could be together again. When she heard that Reginald's mother had kicked him out, Desol was at first pleased, as that confirmed her dislike of Mrs. Blackthorne. However, when she realized Reginald would be in the house permanently, she became worried. His presence would create complications the following Monday when Fartbook came to take Sebastian away. The proposed camping expedition too was impossible. They wanted to stay away for a week and refused to listen to her argument in favor of going away for just a few days, followed by another few days the following week. She'd have to contact Jack. He'd know what to do. The boys couldn't, or wouldn't, even tell her where they were going. Just a vague mention of up the ranges to the lakes, then they'd see where the spirit moved. It really was too much. Fee's computer had been busy. A few minutes after Rex returned from taking Reginald and Sebastian home, Desole had opened the attachment. During the evening she received notifications of posts from several blog/chat sites devoted to discussing the prevention of the signs of aging. Fee visited the sites, noting that Desole asked those present if they'd heard of the Phoebe Beauty Foundation, but didn't confess her problem when no one had. The following day Desole sent an email to Jack, asking him to contact her urgently about Sebastian's proposed camping holiday. An email was received from F confirming early Monday morning. On Thursday, Fee's computer recorded the passwords and followed Desole's visit to a secure internet site to which she uploaded 2 10-minute video clips of Sebastian and Regina LD making love. After guiltily watching them, Rex and Fee enjoyed the best sex they'd had for years. Friday was spent searching the contents of the site to which Desole had sent the videos. It was a virtual wholesale warehouse where purveyors of porn co-old view excerpts and buy copies for resale. The selection was wide, from hardcore heterosexual couplings with extreme violence to vanilla gay and lesbian. No child porn. The hospital was not to be found on the internet, was not in any list of local or state government health services, nor listed under private hospitals. Google Maps showed the roofs of one large and one smaller single-storied buildings plus a couple of sheds in a clearing among trees, but no details were visible. She printed 4 copies of the road map. The name Fartbook rang no bells anywhere, so was almost certainly a nom de guerre. Jack Abacus also failed to register on any of the usual searches. Another fake name. The plot thickened. It was a case of no information being confirmation of shady dealings. Sebastian had mentioned Guapo's suspicions about the luxury hotel at the northern end of the Esplanade, so Fee spent most of Friday in the park opposite, noting the unusual number of Oriental businessmen arriving and departing as well as several girls who had to be prostitutes and a few handsome young men who stayed for an hour and then departed. She also noted someone being taken away by a private ambulance with no exterior markings. She wrote down the make and registration number and returned home. Success. The ambulance was registered to Arnold S. Semble, who had 3 bank accounts in his name with deposits varying from hundreds of thousands of dollars to mere hundreds as he made large withdrawals or deposits on an irregular basis. Where the money went to, or came from, Fee had so far been unable to learn. Mr. Semble had made a dozen trips to China and Singapore in the past year. According to city council records, he had a permit to renovate the derelict World War II hospital compound and use it as a postoperative recuperation and rehabilitation center. At the moment, though, the work hadn't been started and it was uninhabited except for an occasional caretaker. 3 of Desole's emails that evening seemed interesting. One to J, urgent. Come and convince Sebastian not to go camping. Another to F, problem. Sebastian's friend is staying here permanently. The third an hour later from F, both. First thing Monday morning. Reginald was not impressed by Jack when he arrived on Friday evening, and a game slime ball in his opinion. Sebastian, having recently become friends with Rex and Con, now realized Jack was Rather ordinary and common. It was Desol's hysteria that persuaded the boys to postpone their camping trip until the following Tuesday to be available for Mr. Fartbook on Monday. Oozing relief, Desol and Jack assured them the meeting would be greatly to their advantage if they played their cards right. They happily agreed to their going on day trips on Saturday and Sunday, as long as they returned home each night. The following Saturday morning, Sebastian and Reginald arrived in time for breakfast at Rex and Fee's. Con arrived an hour later. A lengthy discussion about the possible dangers of Fartbook's Monday meeting with the boys failed to convince them not to attend. Come on, Rex, what can he do? Plenty if he brings heavies. But why? Who knows? That's why I'll be outside watching, Con stated firmly. Have your mobile ready. And speed dial me if you're worried. No need to say anything, I'll take any call as an SOS. Excellent, Con. It'll be a weight off my mind. Mine too, Rex. It's thanks to Sebastian that I'm now a complete human, he grinned and ruffled Sebastian's hair. Fee was congratulated on her research and they agreed the first priority was to check out Fartbook's hospital. Okay, let's go, Rex said cheerfully, taking his car keys and heading for the door. Hold it, Con said rather more sharply than he intended. If I'm going to be part of this enterprise, then once we've decided on a course of action and have left a place of safety, I'm in charge and you'll all do exactly as I say, no exceptions. Any objections? Silence. I'm not trying to be rude, but you guys have obviously no idea who or what you're up against. More silence. I brought my video camera to record anything interesting. I'll bring mine too. Good, Rex. Now, have we a first aid kit? Drinking water? Mobile phones? Insect repellent? Do we all know each other's numbers? If we split up, what's the procedure? Sebastian says the place is surrounded by scrubby forest, that means snakes and stones and lantana and thorn bushes. Rubber thongs, Sebastian and Reginald, are not the sort of footwear for a secret reconnaissance mission. Do any of you really want your legs scratched and bleeding? If you're forced to crawl on your belly, Sebastian, don't you think a shirt would help? And if we're trying to avoid standing out like dog's balls, shouldn't we wear clothes that blend in? Your magenta and orange shift is delightful, Fee. Ideal if we were lost at sea. Your turquoise tank top, Reginald, is equally outstanding. Another embarrassed silence and sheepish grins. I've 2 pairs of khaki overalls in the boot of my car, one each for the youngsters. Your trainers are fine, Reginald, but Sebastian, you'll have to borrow some stout shoes. Got any, Rex? No problem. And I suppose Fee and I had better swap the fashion gear for something as downmarket as your baggy breeches and jacket. Exactly. You're grinning, Fee. Only because I agree totally and feel stupid. What you say makes perfect sense, give us 2 minutes. 5 minutes later they were sensibly dressed, splashed with insect repellent, and each carried a bottle of water and a bag of mixed dried fruit and nuts. Rex had found and replenished the first aid kit in the Holden. We'll take my wagon, Rex said decisively. Sebastian in front with me as he knows the way. And what happens if the wagon breaks down, gets bogged, is vandalized or suffers some other calamity? We'll be stuck 30 km from civilization with a long walk home, possibly being chased by madmen with silenced handguns. Con wasn't joking and a chill settled over the 5 would-be sleuths. It's not a joke, is it? Rex said quietly. Sure isn't. We know they're involved in prostitution, pornography, and the abduction of young men. All things worth killing for if they imagine they might be in danger. I can't stress enough the difficulties, or the need for caution. Equals I feel stupid. Equals better stupid than dead, Rex. Now, am I in charge? Will you do exactly as I say if there's a problem, no questions or arguments? There was a grimness to his face and voice that sent a chill down his companions' spines. Equals yes, but I think it would be better if you stayed behind, Fee. Equals no way. Sexist pig. Con. Tell him I'm as good as any man. Equals she's as good as any man, Rex. However, it's an excellent idea to have someone manning the command post, and as you're the least fit, it has to be you. Equals but. Equals if we suddenly need support, we have to know there's someone here who can get it to us. It might be equipment, transport, anything. If we split up and lose each other, you're the person who can tell us where the others are. We'll report in every hour on the hour. Rex looked nervously at his partner. Equals I'm frightened to lose you. His eyes were moist. Equals you won't. There's tracking and hiding and subterfuge in my blood. I'll be extra careful, and my Mazda's ready for you to use for backup if we need it. She kissed her man sweetly and they hugged. Equals we have no idea what emergency might arise. We need you here, Rex. Rex grudgingly agreed, and the brave little band set out, Sebastian and Con in the Toyota, Reginald and Fee in the Holden. Sebastian found the place easily enough, a simple farm gate between rough stone pillars on the left of the narrow unsealed road. Con drove past without slowing down, and both cars stopped about a kilometer further on at A=Y junction. They all got out and looked around like tourists. Equals see anything as we drove past? Equals nothing but the gate and a track, Reginald replied. Equals no traffic, no joggers, no animals, it's very quiet. Not much life of any description. Equals old pineapple farming land. Poisonous after 20 years of sprays. Not good for anything. Except houses, Rex reckoned. Equals no good for houses either, Reginald said dourly. Equals poison residues make people sick if they breathe the dust or eat food produced on it. Equals thanks, Reginald, Con grinned. Equals you'll have noticed the swamp we passed, watch out for mosquitoes because there's dengue and Ross River virus around here. Insect repellent helps, but keep alert. Equals thanks, Con. What now? Equals we'll take the left fork and look for somewhere to hide the vehicles, then go for a wander. Another 500 meters and they were able to drive off the track into a small roadwork quarry where the cars would be invisible from passing traffic. After checking the mobile phone ringtones were turned to vibration, they crossed the track. Equals where's the hospital from here, Sebastian? Equals the buildings are hidden from the road in, he consulted his map and Con's compass before pointing. Equals that direction. A few meters away from the road they climbed through a rusty 5-strand barbed wire fence. And after 15 minutes of silently pushing through lantana, bush lawyer, and rough scrub, saw the outline of buildings through the trees. Fee phoned Rex to tell him their progress. Equals remember to keep out of sight, Con warned. Equals Fee and Sebastian go left, Reginald and I'll go right. This is just a reconnoitre to get the lay of the land. Look for building entrances, tracks away from the buildings, note the number, size, and possible function of all buildings, and always be aware of your escape route in case you are seen and have to make a run for it. If you think you can make it, get to the car and take off, otherwise, lie low and call Rex and me to tell us what's happening. We'll do the same. An uneventful 2 hours later they met back at the cars and quickly returned the way they'd come. Rex had lunch ready and afterwards recorded their findings in a folder. When everyone had finished he read it. Equals there's no obvious security at the gate, but after the first bend there's a weighted barrier. Padlocked in place that Sebastian agrees is always there when he goes for a checkup. All buildings are concrete block construction with corrugated iron roofs. The main building is large and looks well maintained. The entrance is rather grand with wide steps and stone balustrades leading up to a portico and wide glass doors. Outside there's a flourishing flowbeat and parking for a dozen cars. All windows are barred, front and back. There's a door at the rear of the main building, and another at the northern end, leading under a covered way to smaller building in the same style. All windows are frosted glass, and barred. There are ventilators on the roof. 3 other buildings seem to be a garage, a workshop, and a pump house with a backup electricity generator. There's also a large, industrial-sized incinerator with a high chimney, perhaps it also heats water, or was originally used to dispose of dangerous hospital waste. A modern improvement is an impressive array of solar electric panels on the roof. Presumably the batteries and other equipment for it will be in one of the sheds. The place appears uninhabited, but there are indications of frequent vehicle traffic on the driveway. The buildings are located in a small clearing, and although there are several excellent places to hide surveillance cameras, the distance to any useful monitoring spot is too far. We'll have to rely on being physically present. Rex turned to Sebastian. What's it like inside? Neat and clean. The foyer's like a real hospital. To the right are half a dozen private rooms with hospital beds and all the usual equipment. The left corridor is spotlessly clean with tiled floors, all polish and chrome and smelling of disinfectant. The surgery where I get my checkup is neat and clean, and there's a cupboard full of stuff like you see in the work area of pharmacies. Bottles and little boxes and all that stuff. Sorry I can't compare it with other surgeries. Dr. Rains is the only doctor I've ever visited. Are there any nurses? Either Mark or Ashok. No one else. Guapo said there were only male nurses, Khan said quietly. Have you seen any other rooms that might have a medical purpose? Fee asked. A couple of years ago I poked my head into one of the other rooms on the opposite side of the corridor. It was a real operating theater, a huge overhead light, gas bottles, trays for instruments. Just like the TV programs. Ashok was nervous when he found me. He'd forgotten to lock it and I promised not to mention I'd seen it. That's about it. I'm sorry. Sorry? You've been brilliant. We're no longer flying blind. Time to head off again. With nods and nervous mutters of agreement they headed for the cars. Back at the hospital that afternoon there was a large car parked in front of the main entrance. Fee and Sebastian had just concealed themselves when they heard more vehicles. A car sped up the drive and parked. A fat man in a suit and another in a white coat got out and spoke to a couple of men in white trousers and jackets who came out and waited on the steps. They all went inside. A minute later the same ambulance Fee had seen in the city arrived and disgorged 2 more men in white coats who removed a gurney from the back and wheeled it and its occupant up the steps and through the main entrance. The driver returned, someone closed and locked the main doors, and the ambulance drove round to the garage. Those 2 nurses are Mark and Ashok, the other 2 are Fartbook and Dr. Rains. I've never seen the guys from the ambulance, Sebastian whispered as Fee stopped filming. After another hour when there was no other activity they slipped back through the scrub and made their way to the cars. Meanwhile, Reginald and Khan were observing the northern end of the building and videoed 2 men in white overalls walk across the covered way with an empty gurney, enter the building with the frosted glass barred windows and, after a great deal of shouting, return across to the surgery with a body on the gurney that didn't move, but didn't seem dead. The frosted glass building hadn't been empty on their first visit after all, it had held either an ill person or a prisoner. And what had the shouting been about? Curiouser and curiouser, Khan whispered. That building is a prison. I'll stay watching until dark. You and Sebastian had better get off home before his mother becomes suspicious. Equals are you sure you'll be alright? Equals sure. Now get along. I'll ring in every hour to keep Rex up to date. Chapter 12. Equals lie where? Equals whatever you like. Equals are you sure there's no dress code? Equals at the straight clubs there is, but not at Phallus Palace or Hole in One. No one would come if there was. Equals which one are we going to? Equals Phallus. It's the classiest and most guys are young. Rodney only performs at the Equals Hole. Midweek for old guys who reckon it's too noisy at weekends. Desole was not feeling generous, but common sense dictated she keep her son happy, so she lent him her car and pressed $50 into his hand on condition he didn't drink or take drugs. That was no penance, as he was so terrified of losing his self-control he had no plans to indulge in anything stronger than water. Reginald felt the same for different reasons. He'd been on a health kick since starting to take karate seriously 3 years before, so intoxicants held no appeal to him either. They found a parking spot about 500 meters from the club in Lake Street and raced each other through the warm evening to a doorway at the bottom of a staircase. The doorman, in cut-off jeans, too many rings through too many parts of his face, and an abbreviated tank top, waved them up, and their money was swapped for a purple stamp of a phallus on the back of their hands. Inside, the noise was heart-stopping rather than merely loud. The bass turned up enough to bring down the walls of Jericho. Most guys were in board shorts and tank tops, or jeans and no tops, so Sebastian's skimpy running shorts and naked everything else attracted a fair bit of positive attention, as did Reginald in nothing but Sebastian's pale blue liquor wrestling gear that was stretched almost to transparency. In vain, however, did their admirers ogle and ask for dances. Sebastian and Reginald had eyes only for each other, and the energetic combination of karate moves with Sebastian's extraordinary flexibility proved such a winner everyone stopped dancing to watch their innocent confusion when they realized they'd been dancing alone in the glare of a spotlight, drew spontaneous laughter and applause. Unaware of the magnitude of the gesture in a gay club where genuine compliments are as rare as hen's teeth, they just grinned and escaped to the shadows, where a middle-aged man as lean and tall as Reginald approached and, using sign language as it was impossible to hear, indicated He should follow. Inside the relatively quiet office, Reginald's father introduced himself to Sebastian and eyed both young men critically. Equals why'd you bother wearing clothes? Reginald grinned nervously. Equals we had to walk half a kilometer from the car. His father sniffed and gazed reflectively at Sebastian. Equals so, you're the young man my son has ditched his parents to live with. Sebastian could think of nothing to say. Mr. Blackthorne was giving mixed messages. He looked pleasant enough, almost handsome, but seemed angry. And Reginald was apparently too nervous to be any help. Mr. Blackthorne changed tack and gave a wry smile. Equals that's the first time anyone's been applauded for dancing in this place. Queers are so fucking jealous of each other they'd sooner stick a knife into someone than tell them they're good at anything. Mind you, it was probably your gear, or lack of it, that triggered it. He reached into his desk and brought out some money. Equals here, the boss's son doesn't have to pay to get into this hellhole. Reginald accepted it gratefully. Equals thanks, Dad. Is Mum angry? Equals no idea, son, I haven't been home since you left. You gave me the courage to get out permanently. Equals I had no idea. Where are you staying? Equals in Geraldine's flat in Whitfield. Equals who's Geraldine? Equals the woman I've been more or less living with for the last 5 years. The woman I love. Equals you're joking. I had no idea. What's Mum doing? Equals praying to her omnipotent God for help, I imagine. The house is rented, so he'd better get a wriggle on, as the rent's due next week. Anyway, Here's my address and you've got my mobile number, so call me if you need anything. Now your mother's no longer in the way, we can start to communicate. I just hope it isn't too late. He looked questioningly at his So-en, who smiled shyly. No, Dad, it isn't. And, thanks. But I'm still not sure how you feel about me being gay. We've somehow never spoken about anything really important. Being gay's not important, Reg. Being an independent man, that's important, and that's what you are, so I'm proud of you. Now get on out there and enjoy yourselves. Rodney's on stage in a minute and I know you don't want to miss him. The lights dimmed as they returned to the dance floor, a spot played on the tiny stage and two burly bouncers carried in an average-sized sports bag, placing it carefully in the spotlight before sauntering off. The bag twitched and everyone laughed. A sudden tearing sound and it opened and Rodney, in overalls and boots, unwound and stretched languorously. It seemed impossible that he had fitted in such a confined space. His stretches became sensuous and increasingly sexy as one of the bouncers returned to pick up the bag. Rodney attempted to stop him, but he pulled it away, and with it the sleeves of Rodney's overalls. Apparently angry, Rodney hurled himself at the powerfully built man only to be tossed aside, minus the rest of his overalls, which were now also in the hands of the bouncer. In boots and speedos, Rodney looked superb and held everyone enthralled with his incredible flexibility until, after rolling himself into a ball, he stopped and twitched as though in trouble. It looked as if he'd tied himself in a knot and was unable to extricate himself, legs over his neck and arms behind his back. The bouncer came on again, made a show of trying to untangle him, took off the boots and ripped off the trick speedos that had been velcroed, not sewn, exposing a vulnerable but exquisitely formed anus. Tossing the boots and speedos aside, he picked up the tight bundle of flesh and carried it around for everyone to see, then tossed it high and let go. By the time he hit the floor, Rodney was on his feet and everyone cheered and started clapping in unison. This was the signal for Rodney's piece de resistance. He did a perfect handstand. The bouncer took hold of one toe to keep him balanced, then, taking his entire weight on his right arm, Rodney jerked himself off with his left hand, spraying cum into his own mouth for the grand finale. Sebastian and Reginald joined him in the tiny dressing room a few minutes later and congratulated him. He was pleased, although he reckoned Sebastian had almost upstaged him in his outfit. He gave Reginald a hug and invited them back to his place. It was nearly midnight. They stank of smoke, were a bit sick of the too loud music and the increasingly spaced out and drunk or drugged guys hitting on them, so followed Rodney's car to his flat. Rodney made them coffee and had them laughing with tales of the bizarre places and people where he'd stripped the previous week. Have you ever worked in the hotel at the north of the Esplanade? Rodney gave Reginald an odd look. Why do you ask? We saw a few young guys going in and out and wondered if they were rent boys. I'm not a rent boy. Nor a prostitute. I don't fuck or let myself get fucked. I'm a stripper, creative dancer, and as pure as the driven snow. Of course, that's obvious. But have you performed there? As it happens, yes. Rodney paused as he remembered. It was about 6 months ago. There was some sort of celebration. An old bloke had had an operation and threw a party for about a dozen men, Chinese, mostly, I think, but could have been Vietnamese or Filipino. I'm hopeless at that sort of thing. They and their boys seemed pleased with my display. Boys. They all had young guys sitting with them. Obviously rent boys and very young. No one over 20. One kid could have been no more than 12. Smart little cunt. Told me to fuck off when I suggested it was a dangerous occupation. Anyway, none of my business. Who paid you? A great fat lump. Fartboy or some equally repellent name. Equals Fartbook. Equals probably. Why? Equals we think he's doing more than organizing parties. Seems he's into other even less salubrious activities. Equals do tell. Equals don't know anything yet, but we'll keep you informed. Equals do that and come and see me during the holidays, I'm awake and home most afternoons. Equals unless you're at the swimming pool ogling young men. Equals there's been nothing worth ogling since you electrified the place with your pouch. Tell you what, join me next Wednesday on stage at the Equals Hole-in-One. We'll do a double act. Equals and give them all heart attacks, Reginald laughed. Equals what do you reckon, Sebastian turned to Reginald. Equals go for it? Equals we'll come round to your place Wednesday afternoon to confirm, okay. Equals excellent. The following morning they cycled again to Rex and Fee's in time for breakfast, during which they regaled their audience with their night at the Phallus Palace and Rodney's performance. Everyone was pleased about Reginald's warming relationship with his father. Con was already there, having stayed the night after reporting to Rex and Fee when he returned. After darkness fell, he summarized for the boys. Equals after you guys left nothing happened for several hours. As the sun set I realized there was a light on a room in the left wing, about where Sebastian said he saw the operating theater. Then the back door light came on and two guys came out carrying a heavy bundle which they took to Teehee incinerator, doused it in kerosene and set alight, feeding the roaring flames for about half an hour with great logs of wood. It got really hot, even the steel chimney glowed red. After the first waft of kerosene, there was a brief smell of burning, but then with the intense heat there was no smoke or smell, just a dull roar. Equals when the fire died down they raked through it to make sure it was all burned, then closed it down and returned to the building where another room was now lit. The large car with Fartbook and the doctor left, but the ambulance guys and the two nurses stayed. By midnight I realized there'd be nothing more to see, so I came back. Equals and they didn't return whoever was in the stretcher to the other building, the prison. Equals nope. Equals I feel sick. Equals hang on, Sebastian, don't jump to conclusions. That person could be recuperating in the hospital part with the other fellow who was wheeled in on a gurney. Equals yes. But somehow. Equals when are we going out there again? Equals straight after breakfast, Reginald, Fee said quietly. Equals but this time I'll be staying home and Rex will go with you. They drove further along the track to conceal the cars in case someone had seen them in the disused quarry the day before. It was a much more cautious and nervous little band that again set off through the scrub. Something odd was happening in the hospital and it didn't look good. All was quiet when they settled in their positions. They could hear a radio announcer and music. At mid-morning one of the ambulance men came out and hung washing on the line. It looked like the sort of green overalls worn in operating theaters. At noon the doctor drove up and went inside, staying for an hour before leaving in a hurry. The watchers retreated into the bush to eat their cut lunch and confer, deciding to stay until dark. At sunset, Fartbook arrived with the doctor. They stayed for half an hour, then left, nodding their heads as they walked down the steps to the car as if pleased with themselves. Half an hour later it was dark, the lights were on in two rooms only, a TV screen flickered and they crept carefully back through the scrub to the cars. Con, who was staying with Rex and Fee until the problem was solved, drove the young men home in the Holden wagon, making a last-ditch attempt to persuade them not to meet Fartbook the following morning. He stopped half a block away and they removed their bikes from the back. Equals okay, then. Promise me this. Have your mobile set so one touch will ring me. Do it now and test it. They did, and it worked. Equals test it again the minute you're inside so we know it works. A few minutes later Con's phone rang. Equals good lads. It's all working. I'll be parked just down the road from your house from daybreak on. At the first sign of trouble, promise you will ring me. We promise. But you can't get into the house, it's a bit of a security fortress. They won't do anything there, they'll take you away and I'll follow. Understood. Now you're making me worried. Good. If I don't hear from you within 10 minutes of Fartbook arriving, I'll assume you need help and will be ready. These are not pleasant men. They're doing something bad, I can feel it. I want you to be frightened and take no risks. Promise. We promise. Desol was clearly relieved to see them and didn't risk asking them where they'd been or why they were so late. She seemed distracted and went to bed early, leaving them watching TV. Neither felt like sex, they were too nervous, but didn't dare speak about it in case they were overheard. Finally they fell asleep in each other's arms, both secretly wishing they'd not been so foolhardy and listened to Rex. The following morning, Desol slept in, so Sebastian and Reginald made their own breakfast and had just finished when they heard a vehicle enter the garage. Con had noted the car and its solitary inhabitant, relieved because the two young men could make mincemeat out of one fat old man. Sebastian peered down and was relieved to see it was only Fartbook squeezing his car beside Desol before closing the garage doors. They were waiting by the pool when Fartbook let himself in and wandered out. Thanks for seeing me, he wheezed. In your holidays too. What do you want? Sebastian asked coolly. I've a proposition to make. Go ahead. Come with me and I'll show you. Where? To see a friend with a business proposition. No. We're staying here. He can come to us. Fartbook's eyes closed slightly, but he smiled and said simply, fair enough. I'll tell him. Sebastian moved as if to get up. Don't get up, I can see myself out. Sebastian and Reginald waited till they heard the door to the garage slam shut before hugging themselves in relief. All that worry for nothing. But of course life is never that simple. Having slammed the door to the basement garage, Fartbook quietly opened the foyer door to the street where a pair of shaven-headed toughs with tattoos and boots and unpleasant faces were waiting. They followed Fartbook silently through the lounge, then with a commendable turn of speed hurtled out to the pool and dragged the young men to their feet, pinning their arms behind them. Shouts and struggles only lasted until the contents of the hypodermic Fartbook inexpertly squirted into their buttocks took hold, and then they slumped to the floor. Mobile phones were kicked into the pool, then the lifeless bodies were roughly manhandled down the stairs and dumped in the boot of Fartbook's car, which backed quietly out of the garage and sped away. Con was relieved to see only one person in the car, and remained patiently waiting for a call. The two heavies slipped out the front door and strolled nonchalantly back the way they'd come, concealed from Con's view by a dense hedge of caliandra bushes. Chapter 13. Con waited 5 minutes before calling Sebastian. No response. His phone was turned off. He tried Reginald's number. Same response or lack of it. A creeping fear sent him bounding up to the front door, on which he hammered loudly. He was just about to give up when Desol arrived. Looking at least 1,000 years old and deeply upset, as she ought to be, having watched her son's abduction on a monitor. However, her wretched appearance was caused by fear for her own future, not her son's. Yes, she asked weakly. Apologies for waking you, Mrs. Sanspierre, but I need to speak to Sebastian, I'm his teacher and he has something of mine. I'm so sorry, Mr. Achilles. Mr. Achilles, Desol paused for a brief sob. Sebastian didn't come home last night. I've been worried sick all night. He was with his friend, Reginald Blackthorne. They went for a long bike ride in the country but never returned. I've been wondering if I should call the police. What do you think? She was good. Sickeningly so. Definitely call them. Do you know what direction they went? I've no idea. She began to weep. Con turned to go. I'll speak to Reginald's parents and see if they know anything. They'll call you if anything happens. He raced away before succumbing to the urge to plant his fist in her unlovely face. I'm on my way to Fartbook's hospital, he barked into the phone. I've been a fool. Somehow. They've got the boys. Desole reckons they didn't come home last night, so she's up to her neck in it too. Join me and bring a weapon. Precious minutes were wasted going home to pick up the bag of tools with which he'd instructed Guapo in the noble art of self-defense. There was no sign of Fartbook on the road. Con drove straight past the hospital gates, parked in the disused quarry, grabbed his phone and bag and in record time arrived in a position where, although well concealed, he could see the front steps to the hospital and the walkway to the smaller building they now called the prison. A Mazda sports car was parked in the main car park and Fartbook's vehicle was stationed beside the walkway. The car boot was open and the doors to the prison were swinging shut. Quelling the urge to make a suicidal dash only to discover Sebastian and Reginald hadn't been brought there, he waited and watched for several long minutes until Fartbook came out, followed by one of the nurses. They closed and locked the doors, conferred briefly, then walked across to the hospital, locking that door behind them. 10 minutes later a four-wheel drive charged up, parked beside Fartbook's car and disgorged two men in jeans and t-shirts. Con thought they were the other nurses. Nothing happened for the next 15 minutes, then Rex joined him and they withdrew into deeper cover to confer. Fee telephoned Reginald's father to tell him our suspicions. He's ringing round his business acquaintances to see if he can dig up any dirt on this place and its owners as well as Dr. Rains. He was dreadfully upset, so he's an ally. Can't think of anyone else we can trust though. The boss Mr. Noel, offered any help we needed, get Fee to phone him and keep him up to date in case he knows anything about the fat guy, the doctor, and the hospital. Will do. When he finished phoning, Con decided it was quiet enough to do a little reconnaissance. Warning Rex to keep concealed, he was just about to cross to the prison when a large car with tinted windows drew up to the front door and a sleekly dark gentleman emerged carrying a black bag. He stretched, looked around briefly, then was welcomed by Fartbook, who had come out to the front steps. Con raced across the open ground to the back of the prison just as the ambulance pulled up to the main entrance. The driver got out and helped a frail, oriental-looking man descend from Tehirair, then two nurses came out and led him into the main building. There seemed to be no possible alternative entrance to the prison. Made of strong concrete blocks, narrow bars on all windows, the rear door of the same solid wood reinforced with metal bars as the double doors that opened from the covered way. The simple hipped roof was corrugated iron with two whirly ventilators. No skylights and no way to get up there anyway. The walls were 3 meters high, there were neither handy trees nor a ladder. He squatted against the rear wall in despair until a text arrived from Rex telling him Reginald's father was coming. Making a long detour back round through the bush in case someone was watching from a hospital window, Con rejoined Rex, who then set out to meet Mr. Blackthorne. The sun rose higher, the heat was intense, even the cicadas had ceased their interminable shrieking. Quietness reigned. Suddenly a whine and the diesel generator clanked into life, numbing the senses with its dull thud. Con was shocked. He must have fallen asleep. He hadn't noticed anyone cross to the shed. What else hadn't he noticed? Guilt at failing to protect the boys that morning ate at him as he watched the driver of the dark car stroll back to the hospital. By the time Rex returned with Mr. Blackthorne, who was carrying a rifle and wearing a wicked-looking knife, Strapped to his waist, Khan was ready to make a suicide dash just to do something. Rodney, who had come with Blackthorn, misinterpreted Khan's desperate look. Sorry to barge in, but Reginald's a special friend, so I wanted to help. Khan stared blankly at the slim young man who looked too fragile to be of any use, nodded and shook the proffered hand, surprised by the strength of his grip. Rex had just finished bringing them up to date when the door from the hospital opened and one of the nurses trotted across and unlocked the door to the prison. Khan dashed forward and thrust himself through the door just as it was closing. The nurse, a lumpish fellow in his 30s, was too surprised to react, and Khan had a hand over his mouth and the point of a knife at his throat before he could yell. Where are the boys?" he snapped. No response. Khan pressed the knife against his prisoner's windpipe, drawing blood as it sank into the flesh. The nurse, eyes bulging in pain, nodded to a doorway that was bolted on the outside. Keeping the fellow gagged, Khan told him to pull back the bolts and open the door. Reginald was lying trussed on a cot, gagged and motionless, but alive. The nurse, quivering in fear and pain, untied Reginald, who rubbed at his arms to restore circulation. Where's Sebastian?" Khan was curt. They didn't have much time. The nurse would soon be missed. I don't know. When I woke I was here alone. Reginald was having a hard time controlling hysteria. Khan jabbed the knife deeper into the nurse's throat. If you make a noise I'll slice through your windpipe and break every bone in your body. Where's the other lad? No answer. Khan jammed the nurse's index finger hard against the wall. There was a click as it snapped, but the scream never came. Shock was shutting the man down. Another finger snapped. The nurse was deathly white and sweating, eyes bulging, and veins swelling on his neck. Where's the other lad and what's happening to him? It took two more broken fingers and the insertion of the knife a centimeter into the man's belly, just below the navel, to make the information less important than the pain. Using the ropes that had tied up Reginald, Khan made a noose round the fellow's neck, slung the end over a rafter and fixed it so he had to either stand on tiptoe or strangle. With 3 broken fingers he wouldn't be up to untying himself. Taking the nurse's keys he dragged Reginald out and back to where the others were waiting. Sebastian is in the hospital. The sick bloke who arrived in the ambulance is here for a kidney transplant and Sebastian is the donor. In the operating theater there will be 2 nurses and 2 doctors. Fartbook will be in his office or hovering somewhere. He doesn't watch operations. The ambulance driver is in charge of the generator. We'll go straight to the theater and rescue Sebastian. Mr. Blackthorn, you remain in the corridor and guard the door. If you see Fartbook or the ambulance driver, immobilize them, but I want them alive. Khan reached into his bag and handed out 3 short, sharp daggers. Reginald and Rodney, come with Rex and me. It's at least half an hour since the patient arrived, so we'd better hurry. I'll take reins. Reginald, take the other surgeon. Rex and Rodney, do what it takes to immobilize the 2 nurses. Kill if you have to. But Reginald's naked, Rex said as if shocked. For fuck's sake, Rex. Get going, Reginald hissed before racing across to the door, followed closely by Khan, who unlocked it and went through first, trying all the doors in the corridor as they went. The theater was third on the right. One doctor, robed and masked, was at the head of the operating table monitoring dials and switches and checking the vital statistics of an obviously anesthetized patient who was lying on his side, covered with a green cloth with a hole where his kidney would be. The surgeon, who had his back to the door, was checking a tray of steaming instruments. One nurse was watching the surgeon carefully, waiting for instructions. The other was bending over Sebastian, who was naked on his stomach, strapped to a smaller table. As the rescue party Entered. He was just removing a syringe from Sebastian's spine. Sebastian's eyes widened. Equals Reggie, he shouted. Equals thank goodness. The tableau froze. Equals what the fuck are you doing in here? This is a sterile area. Get out, barked Rains, the anesthetist. Before anyone had the wit to move, Khan stepped forward and tapped him on the nose with his knuckle dusters. Blood spurted and Rains crashed to the floor. At the same moment Reginald let fly with a sharp kick to the back of the surgeon's knees, bringing him crashing to the ground. On the other side of the table Rodney was failing to restrain a nurse who had his fingers at Rodney's throat. Reginald stood on the neck of the surgeon, who appeared to be trapped in the folds of his gown. Leaned across the patient and grabbed the nurse's hair, dragging him screaming up beside the comatose patient. Equals tie this bastard up, Rodney, Reginald said softly, smashing the nurse's head against the side of the operating table before returning to the semi-conscious surgeon, lashing his wrists together behind his back with bandages, then tying him to a solid-looking towel rail. Meanwhile, Rex was holding the second nurse's head in the sink, crushing his windpipe. Khan handcuffed Rains to a wall bracket, assisted Rex to neutralize his nurse, and then ran out in search of Fartbook. They had been in the operating theater 54 seconds. The carpet in the foyer was stained with the blood of the ambulance driver who'd returned from the generator on hearing the shouts, and had his knee blown off by Blackthorn's rifle, the owner of which was sitting on Fartbook's belly, slamming his fist into the side of his head every time he moved. Reginald staggered across the foyer carrying the limp body of Sebastian. Equals where are you going? His father called. Equals to look after Seb. His legs are paralyzed. There are beds along here, I think. He's very cold. I have to save him. Rex, Rodney, and Khan followed on Reginald's heels carrying blankets, returning moments later. Equals he'll be fine. It's just the local anesthetic. Reginald's making him tea and warming him. He's already showing some color. Now for a little retribution. Equals you mean call the cops? Equals well. Actually, I wondered if we might. He took the others into a corner and whispered his plan. The nods of agreement were tinged with doubt until Reginald came bursting into their conference. Equals Sebastian's okay, just numb from the waist down. One thing he was clear about, one of these guys is Jack. Everyone looked blank. Equals Jack's the guy who claimed to be Sebastian's friend and mentor. Equals yes, Khan said softly. Equals he's mentioned Jack a couple of times. Well, I've just the reward for him. He turned round and called loudly, equals Jack. The ambulance driver looked up, dazed and pale from loss of blood despite desperately pressing on the artery. Equals here, let me carry you to the operating theater, we need your kidney. Eyes wide with pain Jack whispered, equals no, then closed his eyes and slumped. Rex felt his pulse. Equals dead, Khan. Lost too much blood. Equals shame. Sorry, Fartbook old chap, looks as if you're the backup donor. Equals no, shrieked the fat man as Khan and Reginald took a leg each and dragged him along the corridor to the operating theater. 30 minutes later Fartbook was anesthetized and naked on his belly with a blue mark above a kidney. The two doctors, looking somewhat battered, were back at their posts. Equals how long will the operation take? Equals about 5 hours. Equals well, get on with it, I'm hungry. Equals the theater is no longer sterile. Equals that's a risk we're prepared to take, Dr. Rains. Equals and if we do as you ask we'll be free to go? You won't inform the police. Equals that's the agreement. Equals hurry up or we'll lose him. He's already been under anesthetic too long, snapped the foreign surgeon in accented English. Rains sighed and turned to monitoring dials and gauges to ensure the still sleeping patient didn't die before receiving his new kidney. Despite a rapidly purpling bruised neck, the surgeon wielded his scalpel with dexterity, and the two patched-up nurses assisted professionally, everyone spurred on by knives pressing through their clothes just above their own kidneys so that any unexpected move caused a little blood to flow. All seemed to be progressing normally. Fartbook was moaning on his stomach with an expertly sewn-up gash on his back. Although he'd felt no pain thanks to local anesthesia, he was almost catatonic, having been awake through the extraction of his kidney because the theater wasn't set up for two people to be under general anesthetic at one time. The surgeon was having his brow mopped, and there were about 3 hours to go when a buzzer sounded. Rains cursed, shoved something over the patient's nose, thumped on his chest, pushed another needle into a vein, turned a dial, and everyone held their breath until the surgeon stopped working and took off his gloves. Rains looked up and shrugged impotently. Well, that was a waste of time, Khan said irritably. We've missed lunch and now you've two bodies to dispose of. I hope you've plenty of wood for the incinerator. How do you? Shut it. Snapped Rains to the nurse before turning to Khan. I guess you'll be on your way. In a minute. You said we could go, Rains snapped. And you shall, but we would prefer it if you didn't operate on people again. I've already promised we won't. I promise you won't too. Rex's voice was sad. Khan? Reginald. The two men grabbed the doctors from behind in a stranglehold and marched them to a solid granite-topped bench where Rex was waiting with a type of cleaver. No. No. You can't. What was going to happen to my son after you'd removed his kidney? Silence. What happened to all the young men who stayed with Sebastian after your goons had roughed them up and imprisoned them? They're not my goons. It's nothing to do with me. It's Arnold's plan, not mine. Who's Arnold? Semble, the distraught doctor whispered, nodding towards Fartbook, still strapped to the table. He's blackmailing me, forcing me to do it? Well, a sense of justice is forcing me do this, Rex said coldly, raising his arm. My hands. They're my, blood-curdling screams replaced whatever he'd intended to say as Rex shortened the fingers of his right hand by a few centimeters. Rains was spared some of the horror, having fainted before the chopper fell on his. That was a bit messy, Rex. You'll never make a surgeon, all those chips of bone and stuff. I hope you guys know enough to tidy up the ends, Khan smiled at the horrified nurses. Well, we're off. What are you going to do with us? We have a video of everything. We know your names, having found your credit cards and driver's licenses in the changing room. Soon we'll know more about you than you do. If you are still in Queensland at the end of the week, we'll take the video to the cops. Khan turned at the door. And keep fat guts there alive, or you'll be done for murder. I have more business to conduct with him, and if he's not around to do it with, I'll consider it a breach of our contract. Clear. They nodded furiously. Oh, I nearly forgot, your mate is strung up over in the prison. Better rescue him soon or your funeral pyre is going to last for days. Ciao. Wearily they collected Sebastian and their gear, phoned Fee to expect them in half an hour, piled into the ambulance, drove to the quarry, set the ambulance alight after ensuring the fire wouldn't spread to the trees, then drove their cars quietly back to Rex's place. The last 6 hours having taken more out of them than 6 normal days. Fee had prepared a late lunch for everyone and was waiting nervously with Mr. Blackthorn's partner Geraldine, and Mrs. Noel, whose husband was swimming impatiently up and down the pool. When Fee had telephoned and explained what was happening, Adam Noel had insisted they come to Rex's house to show their support for whatever Rex and the others did to rescue Sebastian and Reginald, reminding Fee that he and his wife looked on Sebastian as the son they'd never Managed to conceive, so were emotionally involved. Geraldine wanted to wait with Fee. Having only recently gained sole rights to her lover, she wanted to be near in case he needed anything. She was in her 40s, wore no makeup, seemed devoid of pretension, and was obviously comfortable with her body, having stripped and joined Fee and Vera Noel in the pool soon after arriving. She knew Mrs. Noel through a volunteer group, lobbying fruitlessly for a fair go for refugees, and was pleased to discover an instant pleasure in Fee's sharp mind and engaging personality. When the weary band of rescuers traipsed into the house, Sebastian was still wobbly, but refused to go to bed, insisting a swim would clear his head. After all, he pointed out, he'd done nothing except get angry. It was Rex, Con, and the others who'd risked all for him. Reggie too had fought like a tiger as soon as he was freed. All the men were hot, tired, and felt filthy, so stripped and joined Mr. Noel in the pool, promising to tell all after lunch. An hour later, bellies full, they relaxed in the warm shade and, for the first time in 3 days, let all tensions go. Geraldine giggled. What's so funny? Mr. Blackthorne asked. Nothing, darling. It's just the first time I've enjoyed a social occasion where everyone's naked. It's so liberating. I've never dared take off my clothes in front of strange men before. We women have been brainwashed into thinking our bodies are never good enough, and that makes us shy, Mrs. Noel remarked sourly. Men are lucky. They're told from birth that because they're male, they're perfect. Well, it's true, isn't it? Con grinned. Today, yes. You are all beautiful and perfect. And I assure you we have the same opinion of you women. Fee laughed. I can see con is short for con man. But enough mucking around. Tell all. And I mean all. No self-censoring because you think we lovely ladies are too weak-minded to cope. Rex carefully recounted everything relevant, from Guapo's escape to their arrival home that afternoon. His tale was greeted by a profound silence. You didn't kill anyone, Mr. Noel asked abruptly. Not directly. The fellow getting the transplant died, but that wasn't our fault. Jack lost a kneecap when he was shot in self-defense, and bled to death, but that's because the doctors and nurses were uncooperative. Fartbook lost a kidney and survived, 2 surgeons lost fingertips on their right hands, 1 nurse has a sore neck and a small puncture in his belly, the other 2 have cuts and abrasions and the task of cleaning up the mess, as well as the threat of disclosure hanging over them for the rest of their lives. None of them are going to go to the cops or sue us for damages. You guarantee that? Mr. Noel asked bluntly. I think so. If they got together and found corrupt cops and lawyers, not a difficult task, they could make a case against you for the entire thing. It's your word against theirs. We also have a video. Showing what? Terrified male nurses and surgeons working under stress. Sebastian and Reginald could have staged their imprisonment. No. We need a foolproof alibi. Such as. Adam Noel stood and tapped his chest proudly. I will swear that you have all been here the entire day with me. I'm a well-known professional in the city, have a spotless record, and people take me seriously. Lean and slightly cadaverous, the school principal was fit for his age, but a naked 64-year-old gentleman with a long and slightly sunburned scrotum dangling between thinning thighs, carried little gravitas, and everyone grinned. Mr. Noel suddenly laughed aloud. Do I look as ridiculous as I suddenly feel? Sir, to me you look like a wise and good philosopher, Sebastian said softly, and everyone smiled and nodded assent. Ah, Sebastian. Is it any wonder I love you? Mr. Noel said delightedly. Adam, thank you, Rex interrupted. Your trust and support mean a great deal to all of us. However, I'm certain they won't be pursuing us. Equals, how can you be so sure? Equals, because the place is a treasure trove of evidence for any competent forensic pathologist. Equals, how do you mean? Equals, I mean that Sebastian wasn't the first young man to be in that position. Equals what? Mrs. Noel asked loudly. Equals, what are you saying? Equals, there have been others. Mrs. Noel's lips drew together and she nodded slowly. Equals, there are so many questions. Why is there a well-equipped hospital in the bush doing organ transplants? Who was the man who died? Who are the doctors? If you are correct, what about the families of the young men? Weren't they missed? She looked ready to weep and turned to Fee for support. Fee took Mrs. Noel's hand and stroked it absent-mindedly. Equals, Vera, she said in a voice from which all emotion was drained. Equals, the three most lucrative human enterprises on the planet today are trading in humans for slaves or their organs, trading in illicit drugs, and also legal ones marketed as pharmaceuticals, and trading military weaponry. A new, obscenely wealthy class of entrepreneurs has risen among our trading partners of the Western Pacific, and they're demanding the chance to buy replacement body parts when their own let them down. Some countries give their powerful citizens access to the organs of prisoners on death row, but most other governments aren't so obliging. Fartbook saw a niche market when the airlines quadrupled flights from capitals of the Western Pacific to Cairns. He bought a hotel at the northern end of the Esplanade and turned it into an upmarket brothel, using local young men and girls recruited by Sebastian's mother at her so-called equals employment agency. Equals, no wonder I was never allowed to go there, Sebastian said. Equals, how did you find out? Equals, I'm very nosy, Fee replied with a wink. Equals, then he took Dr. Rains as a partner and they bought the old army hospital, refurbished it, found a willing surgeon from the Philippines, and began offering organ transplants to wealthy foreigners. Donors were no problem in the city of vagrant youths from southern states seeking the easy life. Having selected a suitable candidate, preferably gay as they're frequently running from families and persecution, and the police seldom take crimes against gays seriously, they'd abduct him, rough him up, equals rescue him to make him grateful, then store him at a suitable place until needed, as they couldn't be 100% sure what day the client would arrive. While waiting to donate his organ, the young man paid for his KE by unwittingly participating in porn videos with Sebastian. The patient would be taken to the hospital soon after arrival, and the young man would be taken to the promised job, in this case donating one of his organs. This meant that surgery could be performed the day he arrived in town, and after a short recuperation the recipient would be ready to fly home. Disposal of the donor bodies was a simple matter of cremation in the giant incinerator. Equals, no, Sebastian yelled, standing and staring in horror at Fee. Equals, do you mean that all those guys who stayed with us, guys I really liked, who became my friends, were cut up for their organs and then burnt? Is that what would have happened to Guapo if he hadn't escaped? A chill descended. Equals, yes, Fee said quietly. Equals, in my opinion, that is exactly what happened. That's why none of them contacted you afterwards. Equals, and my mother was an essential part of that trade. Sebastian raced to the bathroom and his retching could be heard in the horrified silence. Equals, that's how his mother could afford the house, Rodney said softly. Equals, I wondered, when I saw it. Sebastian returned and sank to the floor beside his father. Equals, I should have asked more questions. I should have. He stopped and let the tears flow. Rex put his arms around him, rocking gently. Equals, there was nothing you could have done. Equals, but weren't they missed? Vera Noel asked in a horrified whisper. Equals, Vera, several thousand young people go missing every year in Australia, hundreds are never seen again. Unless there's a body, no investigation is ever launched. And as I mentioned, many families of gay boys, especially the devoutly religious, are delighted when they disappear. Silence. Equals Khan, you said you had more business to conduct with Fartbook, which is why you wanted him alive. What sort of business? Rex asked. Equals yes, Khan turned to Fee. Equals I was presuming on the skills of your lovely consort. Equals presume away, Khan. What can I do for you? I was wondering about bank accounts and things, not only of the 3 nurses who are packing their bags at this minute, I imagine, but also the unholy earnings of Fartbook. Do you think? Equals I certainly do. I was hoping someone would ask. Equals well, said Mr. Noel. Equals I think it is time for us to depart, my dear. We don't want to fill our innocent ears with things we don't understand but fully support, do we? Equals we'll be getting along too, Billy Blackthorne said, pulling Geraldine to her feet. Equals I'm available to assist in any way I can and will be in your debt forever, Con and Rex, for returning my son to me. He put his arm around Reginald's shoulders. Equals I imagine you boys need a rest after your ordeal, but remember you're both always welcome to stay with us at any time, day or night, for any reason or no reason. Equals I hope you'll both take us up on that soon, Geraldine said warmly. Equals Reginald is coming with us. Now to see where we live and rest a bit, will you come too, Sebastian? Equals thanks, Sebastian muttered, equals but at the moment I'm too worked up to rest. I need to do something rough and physical to squeeze everything out of my system. He turned to Khan. Equals feel like wrestling. If Khan was surprised he didn't let on. Equals sure. Is that okay, boss? Equals of course. You have your own keys to the school and don't need to ask. Mr. Noel patted Khan's bum as if to underline his support. Sebastian took Reginald nervously aside. Equals Reggie, is it okay? Equals Reginald grinned. Equals very okay. Equals you're both sleeping here tonight, Rex asked. Equals for the foreseeable future, if that's okay with you. Equals Sebastian, my son, as Reginald just said, that's very okay. As the departing guests reluctantly replaced their clothes, Sebastian pulled Reginald into a bedroom. His kisses had an edge of desperation. Equals you sure you don't mind? Equals of course not, silly. I was hoping you'd say a private thank you to Khan. He's incredibly sexy. And so well hung. It's entirely thanks to him that you're not a pile of ashes and I'm not a prisoner awaiting execution. He risked his life for us. When he burst into the room and smashed that guy's fingers until he told him where you were, I thought it must be what it felt like to be rescued by Superman. And in case you think I'll be jealous, I won't. I don't think I'm a jealous type. I want my boyfriend to do what he wants. That's all. Equals and when you burst naked into the operating theater and took out the surgeon, then the nurse, then picked me up and carried me to safety, I felt like Lois Lane being rescued by Superman. Equals idiot. Also, I've never really spoken to Dad, so it's a good opportunity to start fresh with him. Convince him I'm not a fatuous wimp. How long will it take you to equals thank Khan? Equals a couple of hours at most. They kissed and Reginald's penis became painfully hard and impossible to conceal. Sebastian gave it an affectionate tug, laughed and went to find Khan. Rex, who had come looking for them, also laughed at Reginald's vain attempts to conceal his arousal. Equals be proud, never embarrassed of a hard-on, Reggie. But as you're leaving the house, you'd better help yourself to anything from my wardrobe. Impulsively, Reginald hugged his lover's father, then stood helplessly in the middle of the room. Tears spilling onto the floor. Rex wrapped his arms around the distraught young man and stroked his head. Equals Rex. You saved Sebastian. You took out that nurse seconds before he sliced him with the Scalpel. I was wasting my time on the surgeon. And if you hadn't, I don't know what I'd have. He shook his head as if to clear it. Equals I owe you my happiness. Thanks. Equals no thanks necessary, Reginald sniffed. Equals we both love him. Equals good man. Now grab something to wear and take your father home. Sebastian and Con were heading out to the drive. Equals Con, Sebastian, haven't you forgotten something? Equals I don't think so, Fee. Equals clothes. Equals Sebastian hasn't any, and mine are covered in blood. We'll be in the car before anyone sees us. I'll drop him back here in a couple of hours. Okay. Fee's laugh was deep and full. Equals oh Con. It's wonderful having you around, I haven't felt so free with anyone for years. I'll wash your overalls and have a meal waiting for you both when you return. Have fun. Equals we will. Rodney had remained beside the pool and was feeling somewhat unnecessary when Billy Blackthorne came out looking for his son. Equals Rodney. How long have I known you? 3 years. I knew you were a great and reliable performer, but never realized what a brave young man you are. Without you the whole operation would have gone belly up. I've no idea how I can thank you, but know that you've a friend for life in me, and if you ever need anything, you've only to ask. Equals thanks, Billy, but I did very little. Equals without you we'd have been outnumbered. You look sad. Are you all right? Want to come home with us? Equals no, thanks. Very nice of you, but I like to think about things alone. And I've a gig at 6 o'clock, someone's last day at work, and they're throwing a surprise party for her. I'm the surprise. Chapter 14. Con pulled his car up close to the rear school entrance, checked no one was around, then led Sebastian to their lair under the stairs. Equals don't close the door, it'll be cooler. Might even get a draft. They straightened the mat and faced each other. After a few minutes of desultory sparring, Con stopped. Equals you don't really want to wrestle, do you? Equals I thought I did. I thought it would wipe away all the. Sebastian's head drooped and tears splashed onto the mat. Con wrapped his arms around the shuddering young man. When the tremors ceased, he lowered them both to the floor, lay on his side with his arm under Sebastian's head and gently stroked him, saying nothing. Equals I was terrified, Con, Sebastian whispered. Equals it was the worst day of my life. I didn't know where Reggie was, and when they told me I'd be sliced up for body parts I freaked out. Equals they told you? Equals yeah. Fartbook and Jack. They called me a black faggot slut and reckoned I'd helped Guapo to escape, so I'd have to replace him, and Reggie would be donating his heart to someone who needed a new one. I screamed so much they shoved something so far into my mouth I began to choke. Luckily they wanted me alive, so they loosened it. My throat still hurts. But, I thought Jack liked me. Equals you didn't tell us any of this back at Rex's. Equals I didn't want anyone to think I was a wimp. But now I can't get it out of my head. I'm going mad. I thought a good wrestle would clear things, but. Equals no, at times like this we have to talk. To share things. That's the only way. Equals I already feel better having told you, but there's still one problem. Equals go on. Equals Reggie. I love him so much. He's so noble and pure. Don't laugh, he is. I'm frightened I'll contaminate him. They were right, I'm a black faggot. A whore. Totally worthless. Equals you're not a faggot and you're not black, you're a beautiful golden brown. And you're certainly not a whore. You were an innocent young man doing what they asked of you because you felt sorry for the guys. And that's to your eternal credit. You're the opposite of worthless. You're a precious jewel worth more than everyone put together at that hospital. Equals I've an evil mother who's been selling me as a sex object since I was 12, and this morning sold me for body parts. I've inherited half her genes, so I'll end up like her, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Also, I'm a social misfit. Yes, I know we've been through this before and you tried to convince me I wasn't, but let's face it, I'm a crappy exhibitionist with no talent, and it would be better for the world if you hadn't rescued me. You say you like me, and Rex and Fee too. But none of you really know me. They just feel obliged now that I've dumped myself on their doorstep. I shouldn't have told Rex he's my father. I love Reggie, but I'm a gnawed off bone. Spiritually dirty. That's what I feel, worthless and dirty, not good enough to lick Reggie's feet. The best thing I can do is go away and stop annoying everyone. Equals, do you think Rex and Fee are perfect? Reginald doesn't think he's perfect. I'm not perfect, no. One is not even Adam, no Al. Why should you be? Silence. Equals, let's take the genetic inheritance line. Who do you resemble physically? Which one of your parents is thoughtful and kind like you? Which one is liked by just about everyone they meet, as you are? Which parent can't wait to take his clothes off and seldom wears clothes at home just like you? Which one is intelligent, good at school, independent of spirit? Equals, yeah, but. Equals, okay, tell me one way in which you resemble your mother. Silence. Equals, I know, Khan continued softly. Equals, it doesn't help, does it, that sort of rational argument? You feel depressed and worthless and words can't penetrate the black shroud of your misery. Sebastian nodded. Equals, okay, one more try, do you like me? Equals, yes. Equals, and I like you, so I guess that makes me worthless too. Sebastian smiled sadly and a surge of relief washed over Khan. Equals, I also feel worthless because I've wasted my youth searching for a woman to share my life instead of a man. I can never experience the joy of making love to a young man, and that makes me depressed. Equals, 27 isn't old. Equals, it isn't young. Equals, you're one of the most worthwhile men I'll ever meet. You saved Reginald and me. You are the sort of person I would most like to be. Equals, and you are exactly the sort of young man I wish I had known and fallen in love with when I was your age. Rex and Fee told me you are exactly the son they'd have ordered if they'd been asked. They're over the moon that you're going to live with them. Equals, really? Equals, really? Everyone chases after rainbows. The trick is to accept the hand you've been dealt and make the most of it. Sebastian reached across and stroked Khan's neatly trimmed chest. Equals, you've been keeping up with the body image. You look great. Would you really have wanted to have sex with me? Equals, are you serious? If I was Reggie, you'd not be safe near me. Equals, is it too late? Equals, what for? Equals, to shove a memory into your brain. When the meaning sank in, Khan smiled uncertainly. Equals, are you sure? What about Reginald? Equals, Reggie and I love each other. We'll end up living together, no doubt about that. But we're too young to do that yet. 25's early enough to settle down to monogamy. Religions have it all wrong. We're sexual animals, and unless we experience sexuality when we're young, we're going to be frustrated, nasty old men when we realize we're too old and have wasted our youth. I don't mean fucking everything that moves, but we have to know what sex is all about before we can make a rational choice about our future. I reckon if a good friend turns me on and he's up for it, we should just do it. It's no big deal and doesn't make us lovers. Equals, I repeat. What about Reginald? Equals, he's the one I love. With him sex is serious. With you it'd be no different from wrestling. Also, I've a feeling that. Equals, yes. Equals, this will sound weird, but I've a feeling that somehow it would purge me of my sense of being dirty. If someone as honest and good as you wants to be fucked by me, then perhaps I'm not so bad after all. Sebastian's voice trailed away and he blushed, certain he'd simply confirmed his status as a worthless slut. Equals makes sense. And it might stop me constantly wondering what it would have been like to have sex with a teenager. Get rid of my self-pitying demons. Equals seriously. Equals I don't know. Introspection's never been my strong point. But we could give it a go if you really want to, for yourself, though. Not as a reward for me saving you. That'd be really gross. Sebastian gazed at Khan seriously for 5 long seconds. Equals it'd be a reward for me. Khan frowned, got to his feet and went out to the car, returning with a bottle that he placed on the mat between them. Equals this is extra virgin olive oil I use to massage aching muscles after wrestling with you. It might come in useful if you're serious. He lay back beside Sebastian and relaxed, determined to cast every foolish thought from his head and enjoy the moment. Sebastian resumed his stroking of Khan's chest, working his way down the firm belly to the groin. Admiring the result, which he stroked, then kissed. Equals tastes sort of sexy. Equals does it? Equals want to taste. Equals my tongue's not long enough. Sebastian slid up and kissed Khan's slightly parted lips. Equals mmm. And what does yours taste like? They kissed and fondled until Sebastian was certain he'd ejaculate. Pushing Khan onto his back, he lifted his legs onto his shoulders, splashed a little oil where it mattered most, then pushed gently. To his astonishment, Khan responded as if they'd been partners for years, which in a way they had. The experience was in another realm altogether from the awkward couplings he'd struggled through in the past with the young men to whom he'd played host. This was the first time he'd experienced such exquisite pleasure, and judging by Khan's grunts of delight he felt something similar. Sweaty and exhilarated, they recovered their breath lying side by side on the mat, Khan's arm under Sebastian's neck, Sebastian impatient to initiate Reggie into these new delights. Equals I feel clean and pure, as if all my wickedness has been expelled into you. Sebastian laughed happily. Equals such romantic imagery. Sure you aren't a poet? They laughed and cuddled. Equals and you? Are your demons exorcised? Khan grinned self-consciously. Equals while you were stroking me I had a realistic vision of myself when I was your age. A total mess of insecurities, much worse than you. I remembered all the fears that plagued me. What would I do? Would I fail? What did the future hold? Would I ever get a decent body? So many fears for the future that I hated the present. I discovered this afternoon that I'm very pleased I'm not young again and don't give a stuff that I didn't know I was gay until recently. I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it anyway. The upside is I learned what it is to be with a woman, and that makes my conviction I'm now on the right track all the stronger. Equals Guapo's a lucky guy. Equals we're 4 lucky men. They freshened up in the tiny basin, turned out the light and stepped into the corridor. Equals there you are. Feeling better, Mr. Noel was standing by the door to the quadrangle. Equals oh hi, Adam. Yes, we've both decided we're able to live with our pasts. Were you waiting for us? Equals no. Vera saw you arrive and suggested I make sure you were both bearing up after the terrible day, and offer any assistance you might need. Khan gave a wry smile. Equals you've been here all the time, haven't you? Mr. Noel nodded sheepishly. Equals and you've been watching. Equals not intentionally, but you left the door wide open and when I realized you were discussing personal things I decided not to interrupt. But as you know, other teachers sometimes come into school and as you were clearly visible from the doors here, I stayed to ensure you were undisturbed. Equals and you heard and saw everything from less than 3 meters away. Equals everything. Equals end. Mr. Noel had dropped his eyes as if penitent. Reaching out he took Sebastian's left hand and Khan's right and brought them to his lips for a brief kiss. When he looked up his eyes were moist. Equals and I have been in the presence of great beauty. The elderly man let the young men's hands fall, turned, and disappeared into his study. Khan and Sebastian let themselves out and drove away. Equals well. How interesting. It seems that dear old Adam is what I'd have been like in 30 years if I hadn't met you and Guapo. Equals you mean. Equals it explains why they have no children, why he's in love with you, why he told Sprague and Charles to get into bed together, why he virtually encouraged us to wrestle naked and fully approves of you and Reginald. Equals the poor man. Equals not necessarily. He loves Vera and she loves him enough to let him do what he wants. He's an excellent principal and well respected, if not always understood. I reckon he's one of those rare people who make the most of their lives, doesn't waste energy or happiness thinking about what might have been, and doesn't resent the good fortune of others. Equals he's a great guy. They pulled into Rex and Fee's driveway. Equals I need a swim. Equals me too. After letting themselves into the house they made straight for the pool. Sebastian stopped at the doors leading out to the enclosure and signaled Khan to be silent. A few paces to the left, Rex and Fee were so engrossed in an athletic coupling on the edge of the pool they failed to notice two naked men sidle in and squat just inside the door. Sebastian was entranced. Placing his lips close to Khan's ear he whispered, Equals now I understand what Mr. Noel meant when he said he'd been in the presence of beauty. They're beautiful. Dad. Looks like a sleek brown seal and Fee like a lithe black cat. Equals take a look at those cojones, Khan whispered. Sebastian suppressed a giggle. With every thrust they swung out then slammed back with a soft thwack. Fee was on her knees facing the pool, back arched, mouth glued to Rex's, which accounted for their muted groans of pleasure. Rex was grasping her breasts in his hands, thumbs caressing nipples, thrusting with such force it seemed he was trying to propel them both into the water. A continuous wail of pleasure from Fee made a duet with Rex's guttural growls of release, after which they remained locked together whispering endearments, then both slithered into the water, surfacing on the other side of the pool to gaze in surprise at their audience. Equals an excellent show, Khan said affably. Equals yeah. That was beautiful. Someone should make a sculpture of you two in orgasm. Rex and Fee looked at each other and laughed. Equals I suppose I should feel embarrassed, Rex said cheerfully. Equals no way. You're both great. Makes me proud to be your son. You're sexy. Khan and Sebastian joined the others in the pool until they heard a car turn into the driveway. Equals that'll be Reggie. Unable to suppress his excitement, Sebastian raced out and clasped Reggie in a hug. Mr. Blackthorne tooted, waved, backed out and drove away. Equals Reggie. Thank goodness you're back, are you okay, Equals? Equals never better. It's astonishing what a sane father who genuinely cares about me does for the spirit. And you? Did you two have fun? Have you sorted everything? Equals yes, and yes. We're both officially sane and well, according to Mr. Noel. Equals did he come and watch you wrestle? Equals we didn't see him till we were leaving. After a brief swim they ate a light meal and sprawled in the lounge while Rex and Fee outlined the next stage in the saga. Equals we want to ensure that Fartbook and his nasty schemes are shut down forever. Those two surgeons won't be practicing again, but he can easily find others. His sole motive is money, so money is his Achilles heel. Fee grinned at Khan. Equals as you know, Rex took the credit cards and driver's licenses and all other personal information from everyone at the hospital, and I've been investigating their finances this afternoon. It'll take me a few days to find all the accounts, passwords etc., but when I do I'll be able to shift the bulk of the money into a series of accounts here and there until it becomes untraceable, and then it'll be yours, Sebastian. I also want to make sure your mother doesn't profit. The house you've been living in belongs to Audiobook, as does her business, the ranch you went to with Guapo, a few apartments in Cairns, the hotel, and his own house. Equals transferring ownership and disposing of them will be tricky, but before too long you should be benefiting from the proceeds of those sales. Equals but the money was gained by abusing and killing young men. I don't want it. Equals if Fee manages to get hold of it, and that's a big if, then you can do with it whatever you like. Rex said quietly. Equals give it to the government so they can waste it on self-advertising and bureaucracy. Start a charity for homeless youth. Throw it in the sea, never rush into things. Equals what about Desol? Khan asked. Equals I think we should visit her this evening so Fee can check out the contents of her computer and remove all those videos of Sebastian and the others before she realizes her circumstances have seriously changed. Rex laughed and glanced at his son. Sebastian read his father's face correctly. Equals you've been watching them, he sounded amused. Not accusatory. Equals only one or two. You and Reggie are sexy, turned us on, didn't it Fee? She smiled sweetly. Equals yes dear, especially when they tied themselves together with the red ribbon. But you're embarrassing the boys? Equals am I? Equals not me, Sebastian declared with a laugh. Equals I'm beyond embarrassing. He turned to Reginald. Equals Reggie? Are you embarrassed? Equals can I see it? Then I'll tell you. Equals now. Equals how long is it? Is there time? Equals it's only 7:30. Con. Equals sure, you've made me curious. Equals are you sure, Reginald? Fee was worried. Equals very. Equals be it on your own head. The quality was good, the picture clear and the love-making sweet and sexy. When it was over, Con gazed down at his groin and chuckled. Equals look what you two did to me. Rex whistled. Equals fuck, Con. No wonder your girlfriend ran away. Equals frighteningly impressive, Fee giggled. Equals it's even more impressive when you grab hold of it, it's so thick my fingers don't touch my thumb. Try it, Reggie. In the ensuing silence Sebastian realized what he'd said. Equals oops, sorry Con. Sort of let the cat out of the bag there. Con reclined back in his chair and grinned, not in the least perturbed. All his life he'd been shy of exposing himself, felt self-conscious undressing in public, thought his body was either too large or too short, his face not manly enough, his cock too fat. But Sebastian and Guapo had begun the liberation, completed by living for the last few days with Rex and Fee. Naked all day, he'd discovered the joy of liberation. He understood that a spontaneous erection is a normal and wondrous thing, not to be dismissed as exhibitionism. Freed of childhood religious constraints, he felt as if released from chains. Like Lady Chatterley's gamekeeper who, when his naked body and erection were admired and fondled by his lover, experienced such a rush of liberation and joy that he gambled naked in the rain, having discovered to his astonishment that sex could be a joy, not a guilty release of frustration. Equals well, Reginald? Rex asked. Equals are you embarrassed at seeing yourself in flagrante delicto? Reginald grinned. Equals I'm certainly not embarrassed. I look much better than I realized. All this time I've been thinking I was a scrawny stick insect, now I fancy myself. Equals you great lug, I've been telling you for ages that you're sexy. Sebastian grabbed Reginald, threw him on the floor, landed on top and plonked a noisy kiss on his lips. Equals now, see if your hand can wrap right around Con's monster. Reginald looked up to Con. Equals may I? Equals be my guest. He grasped his maths teacher's erection firmly. Equals you've small hands, Seb. My fingers meet. Hang on, it's getting thicker. He took another grip but had to admit that now even his larger hand was too small. Equals can I try? Fee asked sweetly. Con laughed. Fee wrapped both her hands round it. Equals it feels silky, hard and hot. It'd be like giving birth to have that inside me. Most interesting, thanks. Come on Rex, your turn. Rex blushed, leaned forward and lightly tapped the monumental piece of flesh. Equals wimp. Grasp the nettle. Smiling slightly, Rex wrapped his hand around it, nodded knowingly, then wrapped his other hand around his own arm. Equals it's not especially long, but it's as thick as my forearm. So impressive I feel awed as if in the presence of a god. How does one make obeisance to such a natural wonder? Equals you have to kiss it, Papa. Equals I gather you already have. Sebastian grinned evilly. Equals come on, prove you're a man. Rex knelt in front of Con and kissed the shining knob before rising and giving man's most sensitive piece of flesh a sharp flick with his index finger. Con yelped and sat forward, staring in disbelief as his magnificence shrank and retreated into the protecting sheath of its foreskin. Rex shook his head sadly. Equals I guess it wasn't a god after all. And here I was ready to start a cult. Fee put her arms impulsively round his neck. Equals darling. Now I love you more than ever. Equals and why is that, my treasure? Equals because you've shown you're a complete man. Equals complete. Equals you understand that sexuality is something to enjoy, laugh about and have fun with. Labels such as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, exhibitionist, are meaningless and only inhibit freedom and pleasure. You're truly liberated, and if we had more time I'd make use of that magnificent contraption sprouting between your delicious thighs. But, unfortunately it's time to go. Equals do we have to dress? Equals we'll have to cross the road at Sebastian's place, Con. Equals no we won't, Sebastian said excitedly. Equals we can park in the garage driveway and cut the engine. I can open the doors with my palm print and we'll let the car coast down silently. That way the car will be off the road and won't be noticed. It's a quiet area riddled with prowling security services because all the oldies live in fear someone's going to rape them and steal their ill-gotten gains. Once in the garage we can enter the house by the internal stairs. If she hears us Mom will just think we're fartbook. 20 minutes later, Rex's Holden drifted silently into the basement garage of Desole's house and parked beside her Audi. They crept up the stairs and breezed into the lounge, standing in a half-circle between the television and their surprised hostess, who took one look and began to scream. Whether at the sight of 4 large and fit naked men and 1 nude black woman, or the apparent resurrection of her son, was unclear. Whatever the reason, she screamed and remained screaming. Until Con grabbed her from behind and shoved his hand over her mouth, holding her until the others had switched the TV off and arranged themselves decoratively over the luxurious armchairs. Equals what's the matter, Mom? I thought you'd be pleased to see me. I brought 4 friends to meet you. You already know Reggie, my boyfriend, and Rex, my father. This is Phoebe, his spouse. And my stepmother, and this is Con, my wrestling and maths teacher. Desole's mouth was hanging wide in shock. Sebastian stepped forward and slapped her hard. Equals close your mouth, Mom, you look demented as well as old and ugly. Eyes wide she stuttered, but you're equals dead? No, sorry. Things went a bit belly up for poor old fartbook and he ended up where I was supposed to be. Before that, however, he took the trouble to tell me that as it was my fault Guapo escaped, he was going chuck you onto the streets and find someone else to take over this place. However, to save your skin and comfortable life, you offered me your beloved son, and Reggie to be butchered instead. Was he telling the truth? Equals no. No. I thought he was simply going to use you both as, her voice trailed off as she realized she was only digging a bigger hole for herself. Equals as what, mother dear? Prostitutes. Slaves. Come on, speak up. Strange animal-like noises were issuing from Desol equals S throat. Equals what's that? You though he wouldn't cut out our kidneys and hearts until we'd been fucked to death in his brothel. Desol was muttering incoherently. Equals Mrs. Sanspierre, fee cut in sweetly, equals would you mind if I had a look around your house? Sebastian's told me so much about it, and as we'll be moving in when we've got rid of you, I want to work out where all our stuff will go. Equals no. No, was all Desol managed to whimper before Khan slammed his hand over her mouth. Again. Equals come on, I'll take you on a tour, Sebastian said cheerfully, then turned back to Khan. Equals the old hag might try to escape, so you'd better strip her. That was the method she used to keep our guests prisoner, wasn't it, mother dear? Sebastian led the others to Desol's quarters and secret room where they packed up everything that could possibly have any bearing on their investigations, then carried it all back to the lounge where a naked and distinctly unappetizing old woman sat shivering in fear of Khan, who was standing with his legs apart directly in front of her, his groin at her eye level. Equals what do you mean you don't want me to fuck you? You wanted Rex 17 years ago. You must be pretty desperate by now. Come on, just a quick blowjob then. Tears were streaming down Desol's face and she stared in wide-eyed supplication at her son. Equals Sebastian, please stop this. I don't know what I've done wrong, I've always loved you, Equals you've always treated me as a commodity, mother. Conniving with Jack, who, by the way, is dead, to set up the cameras and sell videos of me and the guys to porn merchants. Actually, I didn't mind that. In fact, I enjoyed some things, but getting me to act as a prison therapist for young men who'd been kidnapped so their organs could be used in transplants was a bit rich. However, that doesn't compare to donating my kidneys to Fartbook so you can stay on here. Sebastian shook his head. Equals can't forgive that, sorry. He leaned forward as if to give her a kiss, but spat in her face instead. Rex took his place. Equals I forgive you for raping me because I've inherited a wonderful son, so you didn't do too badly there. But I can never forgive you for selling his body to save your wrinkled skin. For that I curse you. One by one the other three filed past and spat. Rigid with shock, Desol was gagged, then led downstairs and bundled unceremoniously into the rear of the wagon together with her computers. Sebastian opened the garage doors and they drove in silence to Fartbook's hospital, turned into the gateway and stopped. Khan dragged the protesting woman out and pushed her along the rough track towards the main building. The others all followed. Rounding a corner they saw lights. Equals I guess by now Fartbook is beginning to comprehend the scale of his fall from grace, Rex said quietly. Equals yes. The nurses will be long gone, but the surgeons will be there nursing their wounds and keeping Fartbook alive for the next few days. Khan slapped Desol roughly on the bum. Equals fuck. You're bony. Well, old witch, up those steps and through those doors is your only hope of survival. Your dear friend Fartbook is in there recovering from the removal of his kidney, so you'd better be nice to him. Off you go, impelled by a shove that set her staggering. Desol limped along the stony driveway, moonlight reflecting off her pale flesh. Her whimpering could be heard all the way up the steps to the front door where she knocked. The sound was loud in the still night air. Equals mission accomplished, I reckon, Rex said cheerfully, let's go in case they come out with 6 shooters looking for us. They made their way back to the car and drove sedately home. Equals staying the night, Khan. Equals love to, but Sebastian and Reginald have the spare bed. Equals it's a king size, plenty of room for three, Fee said as if surprised he thought it a problem. Equals Reggie, Sebastian asked. Equals suits me, Reginald replied. Equals but my turn first. Con looked from one to the other. Equals hey. I'm not just a commodity. Reginald took his hand. Equals sorry, Mr. Achilles, but tonight you are. Rex roared with laughter. Equals wait till I tell them about this in the staff room. Chapter 15. Fee was already working when Rex finally dragged himself from bed and prepared breakfast. 10 minutes later he heard laughter from his son and the other two, and his chest filled with a feeling of such gratitude and happiness he wondered if a heart attack was imminent. Despite his success as a librarian teacher, love for his ridiculously intelligent spouse, and their pleasant home and easy life, there had always lurked an emptiness he'd been unable to rationalize. That vacancy had been well and truly filled by Sebastian. But that wasn't all. Con, Reginald, and Rodney had also insinuated their alien and wonderful world into his dry and academic life. He felt reborn, revitalized, impatient for every new revelation, every new sensation, and couldn't help wondering what had happened in the king-size bed the previous night. As it turned out, nothing happened except talk and sleep. They reviewed everything that had happened that day, recalling and reliving, discussing and questioning events so extraordinary they already seemed like an impossible dream. Then Sebastian turned his head to the right and kissed Con before turning onto his left side, wrapping Reginald in his arms, kissing him, and following the others into the dreamless sleep of those who fear nothing, not regaining consciousness till they heard Rex preparing breakfast. They raced out to the pool for a morning swim to clear the dregs of sleep. The food was served beside the pool. Fee arrived with sparkling eyes, a huge grin and perfect teeth so white they blinded. Equals I can do it, thanks to Desol's computer, she announced proudly. Equals it's a little beauty and she's kept a record of all passwords and details of every transaction made over the last decade. I didn't want to use my computers because of the chance of having stuff traced back to me, but fortunately, Desol's has loads of storage and is very fast. It was easy to trace and hack into Fartbook's accounts and I've already cleared the 3 largest, their funds are now on a computer located in the Caribbean. After breakfast they're off to Spain, and then to a server in Honduras. I have to check on some dodgy credit card transactions for a bank this morning, so I'll have to go into town, but when that's settled I'll get working on the real estate. Will you guys be okay without me? Sebastian raced around and gave his stepmother a kiss on both cheeks. You're a Wonder Woman. Fee, consider me your slave for the foreseeable future. Equals sweetheart, I have since the minute we met. I'm just waiting till the next slave market in port Douglas to make a tidy profit. Sebastian and Reginald cycled away, Reginald responding to a call from his father, and Sebastian wanted to see Rodney to thank him properly. After waving goodbye to Reginald he decided to first go to his old house for a preliminary sort out of everything he wanted to keep. Con and Rex had a swim then lay in the sun beside the pool. Equals I'm impossibly grateful to you for saving Sebastian, Rex said, failing to keep the emotion from his voice. Equals I don't know how to thank you. What's remarkable is that we've been teaching in the same school for 3 years, yet I've spoken to you only a few times and never realized what a fine man you are. Equals thought I was just a muscle-bound jerk who thinks wrestling and violence are essential elements in a young lad's education. Equals well, everyone knows all mathematicians are mad. And you thought I was just another dried up, boring, wimpish school librarian and English teacher. Equals something like that. Certainly not the adventurous type until you dropped your tweeds and swam starkers with Sebastian at the school pool. That made me sit up. Equals I've always been a little nervous of you. You looked a bit wild. Instead, you're one of the most sensitive, brave, caring people I'm ever likely to meet. Equals you forgot intelligent. Equals yeah, that too. Beau, fort, intelligent et grand, as the French say. Equals and you're a cute exhibitionist with a great body. You're also brave, caring and all the other sensitive new age guy things. Luckily, your wimpish nature allowed you to be raped, and so a wonderful child was born. So you're good for something. Equals have you and Sebastian had sex? Equals ask him, Con sounded curt. Equals what I will tell you is that any happiness I have in the future will be thanks to him. It was his insistence on wrestling naked that opened my eyes to the joy of nudity. It was his interest in me, and his intelligent curiosity that made me question my sexual orientation and prevented my embarking on a disastrous marriage. And it was Sebastian who introduced me to Guapo, with whom I hope to share my life. Equals I didn't realize. I'm really sorry to have asked. It's just that he seems to be both in awe and in love with you and I don't know how to react. I know nothing about being gay. Equals there's nothing to know. Equals but, what do gays want? Need. Equals oh, you mean the gay agenda. That's easy. Gays want to have loving parents, an education, a job they enjoy, a pleasant place to live, a boyfriend or two, sex and, most of all perhaps, they hope to find someone to mutually love and cherish in a permanent relationship, all without being vilified, bullied, abused, and terrorized. Rex was silent for a minute. Equals I'm incredibly stupid, aren't I? Equals no, it's the first time you've been confronted with the problem. Equals it isn't really. When I asked Fee what indigenous people want, she said almost exactly the same things. My grandfather was a Canuck, kidnapped to work on the cane fields, and he said the same thing. Those of us with a permanent tan know only too well what a bigoted, racist country this is, but we forget all the others who are equally badly treated. I know Australia isn't much worse than other countries in its intolerance, but we always hope it will be better. Perhaps that's impossible. Humans have to have underdogs to kick so they'll feel better. Equals yep. At the moment it's kick anyone who looks like an Arab. I've had my share of being told to fuck off back to the desert. That's probably why I'm such a belligerent prick always ready for a fight. Con stretched. Equals I seem to have stuffed up my back, lying too long in one position last night so I wouldn't roll over on the kids and they'd think I was going to rape them. Equals want a massage? Equals definitely, if you're up to it. Rex fetched a bottle of liniment he used on himself after jogging and gently kneaded Con's spine. Before beginning a general massage starting from the shoulders and arriving at the firm buttocks. Bravely he pressed and kneaded, spreading the cheeks and pressing them together again. The sensation was erotic and he got an erection. Embarrassed, he stopped. Equals well, that's the limit of my expertise. Con rolled over, exposing an erection as hard as his masseur's. Equals that was wonderful. Thanks. I feel $1 million. Rex stared at Con's hard-on. Equals I can't believe I kissed that thing last evening. Equals why not? It was fun. Equals yes, it was. Fee's always telling me I should be less uptight about sex, treat it as fun. But it seems a bit strange that I've kissed a penis, but never kissed a man on the lips. What's it like? Equals try it and see. Rex leaned forward and pressed his lips lightly against Con's. It felt rather pleasant, a dry and sensuous brushing of lips. He sat back up. Equals different from a woman. Your lips are hard and dry. I like that. But I don't like the beard. Bristles. Equals that's what I like. I never admitted it to myself before, but I used to get bored sick kissing women. Now I can't get enough of kissing beautiful men. Equals does that include me? Equals of course. And you kiss very nicely. What's good about having sex with men is you can always tell how well you're doing by the size of the erection you arouse. With women you've no idea. Rex laughed, gave Khan's cock a friendly tug and was about to stand when he was grabbed round the waist, dragged down to lie on top of a bristly chest, and kissed with all the passion Khan could muster. Rex struggled briefly, then found himself relaxing. Khan stroked his back and buttocks and pressed their bodies together, pleasantly surprised when Rex's tongue fluttered into his mouth. Followed by a shuddering, rapid thrusting, and a great groan of release as Rex ejaculated. When his heart stopped pounding he heaved himself off, sat on the grass and looked at Khan. Should I feel embarrassed? Do you? No, I feel great. That's exactly how you should feel. And what about your own? Keep watching and you'll discover. You don't mind. Au contraire. It's much more fun with someone watching. Rex grinned sheepishly. Yeah. I knew you and Sebastian were watching Fee and me screw yesterday, but pretended I didn't because it made it more exciting. Most men are like that. It accounts for gang rapes. Watching or being watched while fucking is the ultimate turn on for guys straight and gay. So I'm normal. Perfectly. Sebastian was nervous as he approached the house. What if Fartbook had ordered his goons to watch the place and grab him? They were still on the loose with as much to lose as their master. He stared at the house for several minutes from the shelter of a hedge, panic rising in his chest and throat until he could bear it no longer and cycled away, tailbone tickling as if the bats of hell were overtaking him. He arrived at Rodney's apartment gasping for breath, hammered on the door and didn't relax until it was locked behind him. Panic attack, Rodney asked kindly. How did you know? I used to get them a lot when I ran away from home. It was bloody dangerous alone on the streets of Brisbane. Knowing what I know now, I'd never do it again. And after what you went through yesterday, I'm surprised you're not a caught case. You're tough. Thanks. And so are you. I didn't thank you properly yesterday for coming to our rescue. Khan said that without you to immobilize the other nurse they might have been overwhelmed. Rodney smiled. Thanks, but I doubt it. Reginald was like an avenging angel. He and Khan could have taken out the entire hospital alone. They're awesome. It's a pity Khan has a boyfriend, I could really go for him. Yeah. He's something else. Where's Reginald? Visiting his father. Are you still okay to perform tomorrow night? Sure, but I'm not interested in stripping. I never wear clothes so can't feel sexy by slowly taking them off. I'll just do a dance/gymnastics thing, if that's okay. It will be. The older guys at the hole-in-one are always a good audience, but you can show me if you like. Don't laugh. As if. In Rodney's practice room, Sebastian stood entranced between the enormous mirrors. Fuck. It's a turn on to see yourself like this. Is this how you get your acts so perfect? Thanks. I aim to please. Okay, strut your stuff. Conquering an unusual initial shyness, Sebastian's moves became more fluid, and when he completed the sequences he'd been practicing in his head ever since he'd agreed to perform, Rodney was entranced. Sebastian, that will floor them. I'm going on first because to appear after that would be disastrous. What do you say to putting on a double act sometime? Are you serious? Sure am. If Reginald agrees. Oh, he'll agree. He's not jealous. He knows I love only him. He understands that for me sex with others is just fun and only serious if it's with him. He also trusts me to practice safe sex. Reginald arrived back only seconds after Sebastian puffed up the hill. They raced inside, dived into the pool, then swapped news over a healthy lunch prepared by Rex and Khan, neither of whom seemed able to stop smiling. Everyone wanted to come and watch him perform the following night at the Equals hole-in-one, but he made them promise not to. Only Reginald was allowed because he'd feel stupid if it was a flop. Rex was astonished that Sebastian had even considered going inside his old home without backup. And Khan offered to take him and Reginald there to sort out his gear that afternoon. Mr. Blackthorne had wanted to buy Reginald a car, but he declined as he preferred to keep fit on his bike and could only see problems with parking and maintenance, but he'd agreed to assist at his father's office the following week to replace a secretary who was sick. Fee had sorted the problem with the bank and was ready to deal with Fartbook's property. All land and property transfers, being electronic, can be done over the internet, however she needed Rex to make a few telephone calls and go to the land transfer office. As a more or less white male he would have no problem, whereas a black woman would have them calling the cops to check her identity and police record. But at least I'm not subjected to virginity checks by male vigilantes like the women in Aceh and other parts of Indonesia, she said with a shake of the head. Khan's phone rang. He checked it, let loose a shout of delight, raced out to the pool and chatted, returning almost immediately. Guapo decided not to wait any longer. He's at the airport now. I'm going to pick him up. He raced for his car. Khan. Clothes, Rex called, tossing him a pair of shorts. And bring him here for a meal tonight, Fee said firmly. You are now officially part of this family, so we want to meet Guapo and make him welcome too. Impulsively Khan embraced her. Thanks, Fee. That's the nicest thing you could have said. My parents couldn't wait to get rid of me, he laughed self-consciously. But we might not stay long. We don't expect you to. You've a lot of lovin' to make up. Sorry, Sebastian. We'll have to put off the visit to your place till tomorrow. He dragged the shorts on as he ran, leaped into his car and sped off. Well, Seb, looks as if it's just you and me. No worries, you're a lethal bodyguard. Rex shook his head. Shouldn't you wait till Khan or I can go with you? Reggie's a karate king and I can hold them while he kicks the shit out of them. Stop worrying. I can't when it's you. Just take care, Rex said nervously. All seemed quiet at the house. Sebastian let Rex's wagon drift down into the garage. Reginald closed the door softly and they crept up the stairs to stand silently in the foyer. The place seemed empty, so they dropped their shorts and sandals and padded through to the lounge. Sebastian held up his hand and pointed. A man was sitting on the edge of the pool, back to them, feet in the water. Heavy set. Massive shoulders. Shaven head. T-shirt and shorts. Get us another stubby, Chris. The voice came from the right, so there were two. Get it yourself. Like a shadow, Reginald crossed to the kitchen. Sebastian followed and crouched behind the refrigerator, while Reginald concealed himself behind the door. The wait was nerve-wracking. Perhaps the guys had their beers in an esky out on the terrace and weren't coming inside? After what seemed like an age they heard the sound of a deck chair sliding on the pavers and someone grumbling as he crossed to the kitchen. A sharp chop with the side of the hand to the base of his skull and Reginald's first victim. Crumpled, to be caught and lowered softly to the floor by Sebastian. Reginald grabbed a tea towel to jam into his mouth and another to tie it in place. The man was a giant and began to stir. With a bunched fist Sebastian slammed his knuckles into the fellow's left temple. His eyes opened, the eyeballs disappeared and he fell back, slamming his head on the floor. Plastic bin liners twisted tightly, made excellent ties, and by the time Chris called out asking what was keeping him, he was lying on his side with his hands behind his back, legs bent, feet lashed together and tied to a collar round his neck. They rolled him behind the bench out of sight of the doorway and waited. Not so easy this time. The fellow was wary. He feinted an entry, stepping back in time to avoid Reginald's blow, grabbing his arm and attempting to tear it off. Fortunately he hadn't reckoned on Sebastian slamming into him from behind. He lurched forward, twisted in an attempt to avoid the granite bench top, but slammed his head nonetheless. Reginald winced in sympathy as the fellow dropped audibly onto the tiled floor, blood seeping from a gash in his forehead. Several more bin bags and 2 tea towels later he too was secure. Reginald was grinning, Sebastian trembling with excitement. They stared at each other's groins in delighted astonishment. Fuck. What a turn on. Yep, violence is the best aphrodisiac. Roman matrons used to wait in the dressing rooms for sweat and blood-soaked gladiators to return and fuck them silly. Sebastian grabbed Reginald's hand and dragged him to the bedroom, threw himself onto the bed and pulled his lover on top. Mere seconds of writhing intimacy were enough to achieve noisy orgasms. They disentangled and lay on their sides staring into each other's eyes, fingers exploring in utter contentment. I love you. I love you too. You're so sexy. Look at you. A grand edifice again already. Sebastian gazed down affectionately at his erection. It does that when I'm with you, and I've no idea what to do about it. Your suffering is about to end, I've discovered the cure. Reginald hoisted himself off the bed, went to a shelf where he'd seen a pump dispenser of skin lotion, massaged a wad onto Sebastian's erection, straddled his chest, worked another load of lotion where it would be most useful, then slowly lowered himself, stopping every centimeter, vainly attempting to hide the spasms of pain. Does it hurt? Not in the slightest. Pain is all in the mind. Ha. There was a young queer boy from Deal, who said, although pain isn't real, when I sit on Seb's prick, and it swells up real thick, I dislike what I fancy I feel. Oh, very smart. I thought so. But you great lug, you don't have to. I love you anyway. But I want to. Why? Modern thinking has it that the fucky is the one with the power. He's in control. He has the other man's most precious possession inside him at his mercy. He controls the whole operation. I'm a control freak, Seb, I thought you realized. Soon I'll have you begging for it, willing to do anything to gain entry to my tunnel of love. With a grunt of relief the remaining centimeters disappeared and he sank onto Sebastian's pelvis. Help. This is murder. But they say it gets easier. Anyway, young feller, I now have your entire shaft at my mercy. Are you ready for the thrill of a lifetime? Without waiting for a response from his giggling boyfriend, Reginald contracted his sphincter with all the force he could manage. Sebastian bucked. Fuck. What'd you do? What VE you got up there? A vice grip? You see? Now do you understand who's the boss? Yes, O Lord and Master. Are you ready for phase 2? Yes, Master. Then stop giggling. I have to concentrate. And do you think you could soften up a bit? I reckon. You're deliberately swelling larger than ever just to test my resolve. Reginald tightened his sphincter again and Sebastian crowed with delight. That's so fantastic. Do it again. I could come just lying here while you do that. Reginald gazed down in adoration. You are so beautiful. And you are so manly and handsome. Kiss me. Reginald leaned forward and the kiss was deep. Now for the ride of our lives, and Reginald was away galloping gently while Sebastian stroked his chest, abs, and thighs before tenderly manipulating his lover. I'm coming. Me too. They lay side by side in the greatest contentment either had ever known. I had no idea it would be like this. Neither did I, Reginald blurted, leaping from the bed and racing to the bathroom. Sebastian nearly choked on laughter as gargantuan farts trumpeted into the toilet bowl. Ah, Reginald wailed. It's all gone. And I wanted to have your baby. Never mind, we'll try again. When they finally roused themselves it was later than they'd realized, so they raced around, collecting all Sebastian's clothes, a dozen pairs of shorts, 3 leather thong sandals, his laptop computer, iPod, and stack of CDs and DVDs. By the time his school texts and a substantial library of real books were placed in the Holden alongside everything else he wanted to keep, the vehicle was almost full. What'll we do with the lads in the kitchen? Leave them to rot. Good idea, but we'd better check. It was fortunate they did. Plastic is easy to shred and the prisoners would have been free in an hour. Finding no rope or even string in the house, they ripped the electric leads off the TV, video, toaster, and every other appliance they could find to supplement the plastic bags. I need a piss, one groaned. Not in here you don't. They rolled the 2 trespassers across the lounge out to the garden. There you are guys, piss all you like and when the sprinklers come on you'll be washed clean. Lick your lips if you're thirsty. Oops, you can't with those nasty gags. Lean over the pool and suck, but don't fall in. Rex and Fee's relief when the boys returned was palpable. They'd been extremely nervous, but hadn't phoned, not wanting their new son to feel checked up on. By the time the gear had been stacked in the back of the garage, Con and Guapo arrived and they all splashed in the pool till Fee brought out the meal, which they ate on their laps around the pool. All evidence of the stress Guapo had been under had dissipated. He looked calm, relaxed and very handsome, smiling in delight while Con fussed around like a clucky hen. After congratulating them for subduing the intruders, Con suggested they dump them at the hospital later that night. And then it was Fee's turn to tell. She and Rex had worked hard all day and were justifiably pleased with themselves. It was Rex who realized it would take far too long to sell Fartbook's properties. Instead, Fee had hacked into 3 big bank computers and arranged first mortgages. The cash had already been transferred to an offshore account, and the first lot moved on. Their part in the retribution of Fartbook and his henchmen was complete. So, how did you do it and what exactly does it mean? Sebastian asked. Normally, you have to apply to the Mortgage and Property Assessments Manager, then the place is inspected and valued professionally, papers filled in etc. Once it's all signed off and approved, everything is entered into the central computer with approval numbers and other details. I simply bypassed the first steps and inserted fake completed files in the computers, so it thinks everything has been done properly. From here on everything's automated, no human has a hand in it, so in a month's time Fartbook will be sent a bill for the interest on the money he's been lent. How much? We took out first mortgages worth nearly $10 million. At an interest rate of 7% per annum, he'll have to find about $58,000 a month to avoid losing the properties. With his income stream severely curtailed, this will be impossible and the banks will foreclose and sell the properties, making a nice profit, leaving poor old Fartbook with very little except his life and 1 kidney. And that's too much. Not at all. For people like him death would be more welcome than penury. This is the real torture. Fee's grin was pleasantly sadistic. Everyone agreed she was a genius, so they helped clean up the meal before settling in the lounge for coffee. I suppose I should report Mum missing, Sebastian asked doubtfully. It'll seem suspicious if I don't. I've been thinking about that, Rex said. It's school holidays, you've been making bike trips with Reginald and staying with your father, so there's no reason you would have missed her for another week or so. You weren't close, so didn't bother with daily phone calls etc. Yeah, seems the best. It would be even better if the house was ransacked while you were away, Guapo said thoughtfully. A red herring like that will take attention away from you when the cops eventually become involved. I want to do the ransacking, Reginald said with a malicious grin. We'll all have a go, Con laughed, standing and leading the way to the cars. Clothes, gentlemen, Fee asked. They shook their heads. The naked warriors, that's us, Sebastian laughed. Somehow everything feels more real if you're naked, especially wrestling, Con. I'd say especially sex. He grabbed Guapo and kissed him. Well, just take care not to have an accident, cops are not so understanding. Sebastian ran to Fee and kissed her 3 times on each cheek. Dearest mummy, I love you as much as daddy, and with a shout of laughter he led the way to the cars. They're the 2 goons who were my jailers, Guapo hissed when he saw them lying on the grass. The same ones I escaped from the day I met you. He turned to Con and kissed him. Ignoring snorts of derision from the prisoners. We'd like to roll you into the pond, but being gentle souls we've decided to liberate you. Sebastian said calmly. But first, a ride in a car. They've soiled themselves. We're not putting those pissed and crapped on clothes in the wagon. Reginald turned to Con. Got a knife. Grinning, Con produced a flick knife, tested the blade on the hairs of his arm and passed it across. Reginald carelessly slashed at his prisoners' clothes, causing them to grunt and recoil in fear. It took a while and there was a fair bit of blood before they were naked. Guapo sluiced them with buckets of water, and by the time they'd been rolled down the stairs to the garage they were dry enough, although somewhat battered and delirious. It took all 4 to heave them up into the back of the Holden, then they returned upstairs and quietly pulled the place apart, leaving it looking as if someone had been looking for treasure. Sebastian surveyed the wrecked 4-poster bed, the wires leading to the hidden cameras, the smashed French doors, the junk in the pool, and a great weight rose from his shoulders. The rest of the house was similarly trashed, but the most damage had occurred in Desole's room. Her cosmetics had been tossed everywhere, mirrors smashed, clothes trampled, shoes and hats broken. The others looked at Sebastian and were relieved to see a beatific smile on his lips as he dropped a small card. What's that? Reginald asked. Fartbook's business card that happens to have the address of his hospital scribbled on the back. Smart move. Print it yourself. Sebastian laughed. Of course. Thanks for the help, guys. Seeing this mess, and knowing I'll never have to return is uplifting in the extreme. He shook his head and smiled again. Perfect. Just perfect. He turned and led the way to the cars through the smashed internal security door, backed out and drove away, followed by Con and Guapo in their car. It was well past midnight and there was only one light showing at Fartbook's hospital. They parked the Holden, rolled their passengers out onto the stones, freed their feet, and sent them tottering towards the front door. We should have killed them both, Con said with a sigh, taking a sip from the glass Rex had just handed him. One day they'll come looking for us. It was late, but no one was ready to leave the peace and companionship beside the pool. And spend the rest of our lives behind bars, Rex grunted. Forensics are too smart, we'd never have gotten away with it. Death is too good for them, Fee interrupted. And they won't trouble us again. They were working for cash, not revenge. Fartbook's not going to be able to afford to eat, let alone pay hitmen. He's so deep in debt. And he's going to have difficulty explaining the disappearance of the old bloke who wanted Sebastian's kidney, not to mention all the other strange happenings. So we relax and live happily ever after. Reginald grunted. Equals indeed we will, Sebastian said softly, depositing a gentle kiss on his boyfriend's brow.